Chapter 1075. Yiku looked at Yi Mei and paused for a moment. Sister, what do you want to do? Yiku was a person with too much ambition but not enough intelligence. He was a little clever, but he was easily blinded by superficial things. He was also too greedy and could not be decisive. Yi Mei had lectured him many times since he was young, but it was because of Yiku's arrogance and greed that Yi Mei could easily muddle through. She sighed and said, "You also know that the two of us are not of the true Yi clan bloodline after all. I heard that father has been secretly looking for the Yi blood these days. If he can't find it, then so be it. If he does, what will happen to us?" She lied without thinking, but Yiku was stunned and immediately believed her. He stammered, "Really, father is really looking everywhere for the true Yi family?" Yi Mei nodded. Yiku's expression became a bit twisted, mixed with anger and jealousy. How can father be like this, using us and then kicking us away? Why? That's why I'm not satisfied, Yi Mei said. It's fine for me, but you are different. If the true Yi blood doesn't return, a cripple can't compete with you. The Yi family will be yours in the future. How can I watch as your things are handed over to someone else? Yiku was originally very angry, but now that Yi Mei said this, it went all the way to the 12th. He said, "That's right. That won't do. So I thought of a way. I have to find Yi Maocai's weakness. Since he is the prime minister, he must have some secrets. If these secrets are known by us, we can naturally use them against him." Yiku heard this and thought deeply. He said dejectedly, "Father didn't open his heart to me. Now that I think about it, there doesn't seem to be any secrets. But..." His eyes brightened as he suddenly remembered something. He hurriedly said, "Once in his study, I saw a painting of a beauty hanging on the wall. I thought it wasn't bad, so I touched it and was sternly stopped by him. At that time, I guessed what was different about the painting." Yi Mei asked, "And then?" "Father told me that there are some things in the painting, but I haven't become an official yet, so it's useless to me. When I become an official, these things will come in handy, and he will give them to me." Yiku spread his hands. "That's the only thing I can think of about the precious thing you mentioned. I saw that what he said didn't seem to be false, so I didn't probe further. Does this count?" A hint of joy flashed in Yi Mei's eyes as she said, "Yes. Then I'll think of a way to steal it." Yiku immediately stood up. "No." Yi Mei hurriedly stopped him. Seeing Yiku's suspicious expression, she said, "Since I was the one who thought of this, in the end, I will be the one to threaten him even though it is for you. However, if you were to threaten him, he would be dissatisfied with you, and it would be hard for him to avoid obeying you on the surface but opposing you on the inside. Why don't I steal it and use it to threaten him? That way, in Yi Maocai's heart, you won't know anything and you'll still be his man." Hearing this, Yiku felt that Yi Mei's words were very good. He clapped his hands and said, "Sister is so thoughtful." Then he looked at her gratefully. "Sister, you are so good to me. In the future, younger brother will have a meteoric rise. He will definitely not forget elder sister's kindness and will definitely repay you." Yi Mei smiled slightly, and her gaze fell on Yiku. Finally, she said in a very friendly manner, "I'll wait for you to repay me well." After Yiku left, Yi Mei closed the door, and her expression slowly darkened. She had always been thinking that during this time in the Yi family, she hadn't gotten what she wanted. On the contrary, she had always been used by Yi Maocai. Even because she wanted to escape from the Yi family, she had no choice but to give up her body and give herself to someone like Jin Xingming. No matter how she looked at it, this deal wasn't worth it. And Yi Mei never made a deal that wasn't worth it. Now that the Yi family was going to be unlucky, she had to leave and jump out of the Yi family's ship. Otherwise, she would be tied up and sink with the Yi family. But before she sank, she had to take something back from the Yi family to make up for what she had lost. Since Jin Xingming was going to Ming-Chi, then there would be a day when she would be able to climb up to the nobles of Ming-Chi and reach the peak of Ming-Chi's power. With one turn of one's hand, she would be able to summon clouds and rain. That was the life she wanted. And the Yi family was the prime minister of the Great Liang, so the prime minister's residence would more or less hide these secrets, and these secrets were closely related to the Great Liang. There was no country that would shut out other countries' secrets. This secret was Yi Maocai's painstaking effort, and it was also the stepping stone for her to enter the residence of the nobles of Mingqi. This thing could make up for everything she lost in the Yi family. Now thinking about it, what did she lose in the Yi family? Free power, forced commitment, and also a stupid younger brother. Chapter 1076. A few days after Xia Jingxing returned to the residence of Prince Rui, he had to make a trip to Ruyang City. In the beginning, Lu Jingchun chose Ruyang City as the stronghold for the rebellion. The forces in Ruyang City were complicated, and even though there were people from the MOU army sweeping up the remaining forces, it was only military strength. The imperial family did not intend to let go of any of Lu Jingchun's lackeys that were deeply hidden. It was better to kill 3,000 by mistake than to let one escape, so they were handed over to Xia Jingxing to handle personally. After Xia Jingxing left, all the internal and external affairs of the residence of Prince Rui were handed over to Shen Miao. The residence of Prince Rui had a light attitude in the entire Longyi. Many of the officials were still on the sidelines and were watching every move of the residence of Prince Rui. The more critical it was, the more no mistakes could be made. Shen Miao, like in the past, would talk to those Furins from time to time and imperceptibly pass on some information. The situation was finally under control. This wave of disaster brought by the Lu family was considered over. As the Lu family's rebellion started from Ruyang, the commoners of Longyi were not affected much. At most they followed the public opinion and scolded the Lu family as rebels and traitors. The commoners were stable and the officials did not dare to act on their own. The overall situation was stable and everything looked the same as before, except for one family. The prime minister residence, Yi family. Yi Maocai had been in the imperial court for so many years. When Emperor Yongle sat on the throne, he was still a weak youth. Now that this youth had grown into an unfathomable man and his methods were as ruthless as his father, the Yi family did not have a way out. Yi Maocai was not as stupid as Lu Jingchun and was not as arrogant as Lu Jingchun. The power that Emperor Yongle displayed made Yi Maocai understand that the current Yi family did not have the ability to compete with the imperial family of the Great Liang and could only be like a needle, a thorn, piercing into Emperor Yongle's body. It was not painful, but what the Yi family had to pay was the fate of the entire residence. No one wanted to die and no one was willing to walk on a dead end. Yi Maocai had to start planning an escape route for himself. He hoped to be able to protect his only son, but when necessary, all these could be abandoned. But the most important thing was that every move of the Yi family was being watched by the imperial family and it would be extremely difficult to escape. Moreover, no one had expected Emperor Yongle to act so quickly. On this day, when Shen Miao returned from the residence of the imperial censors Furin, it was already late in the evening. The long summer had finally passed, and the first signs of early autumn could be seen. The flowering trees in the courtyard began to shed their leaves. A thin layer of leaves fell and was swept away. A gust of wind blew, scattering a few grains of leaves. Jingzhe was so angry that her head hurt, but after the wind blew over, she would involuntarily sweep the courtyard with the broom. Shen Miao was standing at the side of the courtyard when Uncle Tang happened to walk over. When he saw her, he smiled. "Furin, the kitchen has cooked soup today. When the soup is done, get someone to send a bowl over to Furin. These days, Madam has been going out early and returning late. It must have been hard on you. It's just accompanying someone to chat. It's not hard work." Shen Miao smiled. She then thought of Xia Jingxing who was still in Ruyang and could not help but sigh. Things were far from over. The calmer Long Yi looked, the deeper the danger he was hiding. Even if the Yi family was taken care of, what about Ming Qi that was thousands of miles away? Now she was worried about two things. On one hand, she had to worry about Ming Qi, and on the other hand, she had to worry about the Great Liang. How long could Emperor Yongl's illness last, and when would Fu Xiuyi and the Qin country join hands to attack the Great Liang? These were all uncertain matters. If there were any accidents in the imperial family of the Great Liang, only Xia Jingxing could bear the responsibility. At the same time, she would have to face more problems. Chapter 1077. Xia Jingxing's words were right, there was no more time. There wasn't much time left for them to slowly plan how to deal with the other party. Just as he was thinking, he saw Mo Qing rushing in with a strange expression. These days, Shen Miao let Mo Qing monitor the movements of Yi Mei siblings day and night. Yi Mei had already hooked up with Jin Xingming, and Jin Xingming was about to leave the Great Liang, thus Yi Mei was determined not to let her have her way. In some aspects, Yi Mei was more troublesome than Yi Mao Kai. His Majesty has issued an edict to invite Yi Mao Kai into the palace. Mo Qing said. Shen Miao was startled. Enter the palace? Mo Qing nodded his head, correct. Currently the Yi residence is in chaos and the servants are scattering in all directions to escape. But there are people from the palace guarding outside, but it is very chaotic inside. Shen Miao muttered, how could it be so fast? It was a known fact that Emperor Yongle wanted to deal with the Yi family and she was not surprised at all. But now that Xia Jingxing was in Ruyang and Emperor Yongli's health was not good, if Xia Jingxing was around to give the order, perhaps there would be more assurance. But when Shen Miao thought about it again, Emperor Yongli's actions were so fast that even she felt that it was fast, most likely it was even more sudden for Yi Mao Kai. The Yi clan was also a cunning rabbit with 3 burrows. If the Yi clan was given a chance to breathe, it was inevitable that Yi Mao Kai would find a way to escape in the future. Now, in the name of entering the palace, Yi Mao Kai was placed under house arrest. To catch the thief, first catch the leader. This Yi mansion was like a group of dragons without a leader. First, they would be in chaos. When he wanted to clean them up, it would be a piece of cake. She thought about it and said, You, Song Yang, and Tai Yi immediately go to the Yi mansion and keep an eye on Yi Mei and her brother. If they make any movements, follow them first. If they want to leave Long Yi, stop them and bring them back, dead or alive. The 3 of them are keeping an eye on Yi Mei and her brother. Song Yang jumped down from the tree and said, This is too much of a waste. I heard that Madame Yi is not a simple person. Why don't I go and take a look at her? Don't worry about her. Shen Miao said, even though she is intelligent, she is after all a woman. These days the news that was inquired was that Yi Mao Kai would not allow Yi Furan to intervene in his political affairs. Yi Furan would not be able to come into contact with Yi Mao Cai's power, so she could only exist as an intelligent woman. The emperor didn't let her enter the palace because he realized that she wouldn't be able to stir up any waves by herself. On the other hand, Yi Mei and her brother are very cunning. They left the Yi mansion so easily. I always feel that it is not that simple. She must have some plan, and this plan is beneficial to her. This is what you need to pay attention to. Song Yang thought about it and felt that what she said made sense, so he nodded. Tai Yi would only listen to orders, not to mention Mo Qing. Just as the 3 of them were about to leave, Shen Miao paused and suddenly called out to them, That's right, if you meet the young master of the Yi residence who is unable to walk, do not hurt him. If someone wants to hurt him, remember to help him. In the middle of the night, the Yi residence was in a state of chaos. No one would have thought that the imperial family would suddenly send people to invite Yi Mao Kai away. Even though the servants did not know what happened, but these days they had heard some rumors. Now that Yi Mao Kai was invited away, Yi Mao Cai's resistance confirmed the conjecture in the servants' hearts. In a moment, everyone packed their clothes and jewelry and prepared to escape. Some felt that there was no hope of escaping and secretly cried in the room. There were also some who pretended that nothing had happened and hoped that it was a misunderstanding and continued to do their own things. The entire residence was in a state of panic. These servants were usually disciplined very well by Yi Furan, but when it was a matter of life and death, unless one was a saint, no one would be able to remain calm. Chapter 1078. In this chaos, Madame Yi had already started to pack up her gold, silver, and other valuables. She had long seen Yi Maocai's plan. She originally had a trace of hope for Yi Maocai, but in Yi Maocai's escape plan, she was not included. Husband and wife were birds in the same forest, flying separately in the face of disaster. Madame Yi could be considered to have seen it clearly now. Yi Maocai did not care about the relationship between husband and wife, and she had the right to pretend that she did not have such a husband. The escape route that Yi Maocai had arranged now happened to be convenient for him. There was no choice. Who asked Yi Maocai to be the biggest target in Emperor Yongli's eyes? She seriously searched the room for banknotes and jewelry that could be taken away, trying to pick up as light as possible. After all, she could not just sit and wait for death. Yi Mei and Yi Ke were the same at this moment. Yi Ke paced back and forth in the room, his eyebrows full of anxiety. From time to time, he asked Yi Mei, "Sister, do you think this is true? Is the Prime Minister's residence really finished? How is this possible? We did not hear anything before. Perhaps the Emperor invited Father into the palace for some court matters, and it is not what we think." Yi Mei was packing up some banknotes. A few days ago, she had already started to change those jewelry into silver, and then changed them into banknotes that could be used by all the banks in the Great Liang. These things were easy to carry, and they were indispensable. She said, "Are you still deceiving yourself and others now? If it was simply to talk about court matters, why did Yi Maocai let the imperial guards attempt to escape when he was invited away? It was obvious that he wanted to abscond to avoid punishment. But there was no sign before this." Yi Ke still refused to believe Yi Mei's words. "You just did not pay attention." Yi Ke's eyes widened, and he stared at Yi Mei in disbelief. "What do you mean, sister? Did you already know? Since you already knew, why didn't you tell me?" "I was just casually guessing, relying more on intuition, and there was no evidence." "Even if I told you, would you believe me?" Yi Mei sneered in her heart, but on the surface, she said gently, "Moreover, these things, I will settle them myself. After all, you are my younger brother. Now that the Yi family is in trouble, we cannot be tied to it and sink together. We have to find a chance to escape. I will take you with me." Yi Ke's expression was a little complicated, and he seemed to be very unwilling. "I originally thought that staying in the Yi mansion was the best choice, but I didn't expect that not only did I not get an official position, but now I have to run away like a stray dog. Thinking about it this way, it would have been better if I hadn't followed the Yi family back in Qinzhou. This isn't even as good as before." That might not be the case. Yi Mei collected all the banknotes and divided them into several portions. She then said, "We have to keep our lives first. You don't have to wait here. Why don't you go back to your room first and put away all your valuables? These things will be useful when we escape." Yi Ke moved his lips, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He walked out of Yi Mei's room with his head down, as if he had accepted his fate. It seemed like he had listened to Yi Mei and returned to the room to pack up. Yi Mei saw that after he left, there was no sound outside the room for a long time. Only then did she stand up, a trace of haze flashing through her eyes. After pausing for a moment, she quietly left the room. She walked towards Yi Maocai's study. The door to Yi Maocai's study was closed. Usually, only Yi Ke and Madame Yi went into the study, and Yi Maocai occasionally said something to them. However, Yi Maocai was a cautious person. If he really wanted to hide something, he probably wouldn't do it in a place like the study that could be easily found. However, the more dangerous the place, the safer it was. Yi Maocai could also do the opposite and deliberately put things in the study to surprise people. Chapter 1079. However, Yi Mei had received a hint from Yi Ke before. She knew that Yi Maocai had hung a painting of a beauty in the study. There seemed to be something strange about the painting. There was something important in it that Yi Mao Kai had mentioned. Now that Yi Mao Kai had been taken away, there was no hope for Yi Ke to be promoted, so this thing could only be placed here. Because everyone in the Prime Minister's residence was in a state of panic, there was no one outside the study. Yi Mei entered easily and quickly found the painting of a beauty. The painting of a beauty was hung on the wall opposite Yi Mao Cai's desk. Yi Mei walked over and touched it with both hands. She saw that the painting was very flat and there was nothing wrong with it. How did Yi Ke find it? Yi Mei did not give up and looked carefully again, but still did not find anything. She was a little discouraged and suspected that Yi Mao Kai had moved the thing in the painting somewhere else. Yi Mei vented her anger on the painting of a beauty. She looked at the painting with dissatisfaction and saw that there was something wrong with the beauty in the painting. The beauty in the painting was standing under a peach tree with a faint smile on her face. Her cheek seemed to be flushed, and she looked very bashful. That pair of eyes was very cold and did not contain a smile. Moreover, they were bright, giving people an illusion that the painting was lifelike and made people feel a chill on their backs. Yi Mei's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly reached out her hand to touch the eyes of the beauty in the painting. Sure enough, the place where her fingers touched was a hard protrusion. She pressed down hard, only to hear a "pa" sound. On the wall, the painting of the beauty suddenly caved in. She was excited. She reached inside and took out an iron box. Inside the box should be what Yi Ke said, Yi Mao Cai's precious thing. After Yi Mei got the thing, she did not stay any longer. She turned around and was about to leave. At this moment, the door of the study was suddenly pushed open with a creak. Yi Mei was stunned and saw Yi Hongguang pushing his wheelchair in. Seeing Yi Mei, Yi Hongguang was also stunned. Big sister. Yi Hongguang was very worried today. All the servants in the residence were in a state of panic. As a young master who was unable to walk, he did not have a high status in the residence. Usually, Yi Mao Kai would protect him and they would not go overboard with him. However, once Yi Mao Kai left, Madame Yi would not care about him and the servants would not care about him either. There wasn't even a person to push his wheelchair. Yi Hongguang was also very worried for Yi Mao Kai, but there was no one in the manor who spoke to him. In his distress, he could only push his wheelchair to Yi Mao Cai's study. It was as if the study still had Yi Mao Cai's aura. It made him feel like he was still the young master of the Yi family who had his father's protection. Who knew that as soon as he entered the study, he would see Yi Mei? Big sister, why are you here? Yi Hongguang asked. Yi Mei was still holding the iron box in her hand. When she saw Yi Hongguang come in, she let out a sigh of relief and smiled. Oh, father asked me to come here to find something for him. I'll give it to him when he returns from the palace. I saw that the servants in this mansion were all busy, so I came to look for them myself. What is it? Yi Hongguang's gaze fell on the box in Yi Mei's arms. Is it the box that big sister is holding? Yi Mei smiled and said, yes. She then said, third brother is also here to look for something. Then I won't disturb you anymore. I'll leave this room for third brother. Third brother can slowly look for it. She was about to leave and just as she was about to step over Yi Hongguang's wheelchair, she heard Yi Hongguang suddenly say, big sister, don't you know that father never lets women into his study? Yi Mei paused and stopped in her tracks. Chapter 1080. Yi Hongguang's eyes were very clear and innocent, but at this moment, they seemed to be very sharp. He said, big sister, why are you lying? Why are you lying to me? I'm not lying. Yi Mei composed herself and smiled. I'm telling the truth. If you don't believe me, wait for father to come back and ask him. Then you'll know if I'm telling the truth or not. Yi Hongguang acted as if he didn't hear Yi Mei's words and continued, is it because of the box in your arms? Is it because you want to steal the item in this box? This box belongs to my father, right? Although I don't know what it is, since you came to steal something in this chaotic time, it must be very important to my father. It must be very precious. Yi Mei was stunned. This seemingly weak, crippled young master had inherited some of Yi Maotsai's things. Although he didn't understand the ways of the world, he was undoubtedly very smart. Yi Mei slowly clenched her fists. Put this box down and I can pretend that nothing happened. Yi Hongguang said. Third brother, Yi Mei tried to coax him. Father told me to take this box. I really didn't steal it. Since you didn't steal it and father told you to take it, there's no need to rush. Wait for father to come back and give it to him personally. Yi Hongguang wasn't willing to give in. Yi Mei saw that the appointed time with Jin Xingming was getting closer and closer. She panicked and said, what if I don't? Why not? Yi Hongguang frowned. Did you really steal it? Yi Mei was a little angry. Yi Hongguang's way of thinking was different from ordinary people. She didn't even know how to threaten or bribe this young man in front of her. She said he was smart, but he was stupid enough to think that she would hand over the item in her hands. She said he was stupid, but he saw the uniqueness of this box and stopped her at such a crucial time. Seeing that Yi Mei didn't move, Yi Hongguang's good temper gradually disappeared. He said seriously, if big sister insists on not giving it to me, I can only call mother over and have her stop you. Madam Yi. Even though Madam Yi was not worth mentioning in the eyes of Emperor Yongle, she was the leader of all the servants in the Prime Minister's residence. All the servants had to listen to her commands. Furthermore, even though Madam Yi acknowledged her as her daughter, she stood on Yi Maotsai's side. If Madam Yi found out about this, she might not be able to keep the box. No. Yi Mei blurted out. Then put down the box. Yi Mei said, third brother, listen to me, someone. Yi Hongguang suddenly shouted, scaring Yi Mei so much that she immediately covered his mouth. Yi Hongguang began to struggle, but he couldn't walk, and he was too weak to use any strength. He was completely restrained by Yi Mei. Yi Mei covered his mouth, but her gaze fell on the large scissors in the wastebasket not far from her hand, flashing with silver light. Her eyes flashed and she suddenly had a plan. Without any hesitation, she grabbed the scissors and fiercely stabbed Yi Hongguang in the chest without even furrowing her brows. Yi Hongguang's mouth and nose were pressed by Yi Mei. Yi Mei suddenly stabbed Yi Hongguang with a pair of scissors. He kicked his legs wildly as he glared at Yi Mei. It was as if he hadn't expected such a vicious woman to exist in this world. However, he didn't have the strength to shout anymore and could only make a "ah" sound from his throat. Yi Mei looked at him coldly and said, I didn't want to kill you, but you talked too much. She turned and left. Chapter 1081. Yi Hongguang collapsed on the ground. His wheelchair was overturned, and he was sprawled on the ground. His blood gradually dyed the ground. He tried his best to crawl to the door to call for help, but it was easier said than done. The door was so close, but at this moment, it was like a road with no end in sight. It was so long that it made one despair. Tai Yi and the others had just arrived at the Yi residence, but they didn't see Yi Mei's whereabouts. They thought that Yi Mei had escaped in a short amount of time, but when they checked the study room, they were shocked. Yi Hongguang was lying in a pool of blood, barely breathing. They didn't know if he was dead or alive. Song Yang asked, what happened? What should we do? Mo Qing came out from another room and said, Yi Mei and younger brother intend to escape from the residence. Tai Yi eldest brother's Qinggong is good, you will follow. Tai Yi acknowledged and leaped out of the window, disappearing into the night. When Mo Qing's gaze landed on Yi Hongguang's body, he jumped in fright and said, what happened? I don't know. Song Yang scratched his head and squatted beside Yi Hongguang to check his breath. He's still breathing, but I don't know if he can be saved. It seems that they have been schemed by others. Mo Qing said, quickly move out and lure people over. Come on. Song Yang clapped his hands. The servants in this manner are all busy with their own matters, how would they have the time to care about this young master? Haven't you heard of the saying, a phoenix with its feathers down is no better than a chicken? Moreover, the madam of this mansion doesn't really like him. Seeing him like this, she can't wait to clap her hands in delight. How could she call for a doctor for him? Then bring him back. Mo Qing walked to Yi Hongguang's side and carried him up. Yi Hongguang's body was weak and it was effortless to carry him up. Mo Qing said, Furen sees this boy in a different light and if we do not save him, it would not be good. Thinking that if Furen was present, she would also make the same choice. Bring him back to young Master Gao first. Whether he can be saved or not depends on his fate. Song Yang shrugged. I'll listen to you. The young man suddenly opened his eyes and squeezed out a few words with great effort. Steal things. Run. What does he mean by that? Song Yang was puzzled. However, Yi Hongguang's head tilted to the side, and he didn't wake up no matter how hard he tried. I don't understand. Let's go quickly and wait for the servants to come. Mo Qing said. The two of them did not dare to delay any longer. They did not stay here for long and quickly left. Shen Miao was sitting in the room waiting for news. Emperor Yongli's actions came so quickly that many things had to be brought forward. Planning was one matter and seeing if the plan would succeed was another matter. However, Tai Yi and the others had been gone for so long, causing her heart to sink. She wondered if Yi Mei had already escaped. Just as she was thinking, she heard Jing Zhe saying happily, They are back, they are back. They are back. Shen Miao stood up and heard Gu Yu's surprised voice coming from outside the door. What is going on? Quickly call Dr. Gao over. This was Mo Qing's voice. Following that, the door was pushed open and Mo Qing and Song Yang both walked in. Mo Qing was carrying someone and when they entered the room, he placed that person on the couch. Shen Miao took a look and was stunned as she cried out involuntarily, Yi Hongguang. When this subordinate went over, he was found lying in the study and seemed to have been assassinated. The assassin should be someone from the residence. Yi Mei's siblings were planning to escape and Tai Yi was already following behind them. He left a signal along the way and this subordinate would immediately rush over. One had already ordered someone to invite Gentleman Gao. Mo Qing explained. Who in the Yi residence would have such a deep hatred with a child? Shen Miao saw Yi Hongguang's face that was 90% similar to Fu Ming's, and her heart was very sad and somewhat angry, to even lay such a vicious hand on a child. Perhaps it was done by Yi Mei. Song Yang said. Shen Miao frowned, what is the meaning of this? This child woke up once and said a few words, Mei stole something and ran away. Mo Qing said, this subordinate guessed that she perhaps wanted to say that Yi Mei stole something and ran away. Perhaps Yi Hongguang bumped into her when she was stealing and thus silenced her. But what exactly was stolen? Song Yang said, gold, silver and jewelry. To lay hands on a child for these things. TSK. This female is really ruthless. Not right. Shen Miao suddenly said. Both of them were surprised for a moment and asked at the same time, what is not right? Not right. This matter is not right. A thought suddenly flashed in Shen Miao's mind and without any time to consider, she immediately said, Song Yang, immediately follow the signal that Tai Yi left behind. If you see Li Mei leaving Long Yi, no matter if it is by land or water, do not stop her. But you must delay their time and make them slow down a little. Do not stop them. Song Yang was startled. Yes, do not stop them. Shen Miao said. She looked again at Yi Hongguang who was lying on the couch and switched Jing Zhe and Gu Yu over so that Gao Yang would immediately cooperate with her. Finally, she said to Mo Qing, follow me to the study. Even though everyone was baffled, seeing her dignified expression, they did not dare to refute and followed her. Shen Miao's eyes were as cold as a knife. Mei Furen stole something and ran away. Steal what? Where to run to? Shen Miao more or less understood her plans, so she specially came to send her off. Chapter 1082. Yi Mei and Yi Ke jumped onto Jin Xingming's carriage. Jin Xingming had some ability to even bribe the servants of the Prime Minister's residence. Even so, Yi Mei and Yi Ke's movements were still discovered by the people in the palace who were guarding outside. The carriage ran in front, and the soldiers chased relentlessly from behind. Yi Ke looked out the window of the carriage and saw that in the darkness of the night, the sound of hurried hooves coming from behind was particularly clear, making his heart tighten. He looked at Yi Mei with some fear and said, "Sister, what do we do? If they catch up, we're finished." He then urged the coachman, "Can we go faster?" The coachman ruthlessly whipped the horse again, and the speed of the horse became slightly faster. Yi Ke's heart settled down a little. He suddenly thought of something and said, "Sister, when did you prepare this? If you hadn't prepared the carriage beforehand, I'm afraid we wouldn't have gone far before we were caught. I naturally had to plan these things early." Yi Mei wouldn't tell Yi Ke that the carriage was obtained by Jin Xingming, and she definitely wouldn't tell Yi Ke that they were going to escape with Jin Xingming today. Or rather, in Yi Mei's original plan, Yi Ke wasn't included. Seeing that the carriage was about to turn a corner on a street, Yi Mei looked outside and said, "This won't do. With the two of us in a carriage, it'll be easier for them to catch up. If they go all out, they might catch up. It's better to split up and meet up at Babeo Street in a while." Split up. Yi Ke was at his most nervous. When he heard that he had to split up with Yi Mei, he immediately panicked. He said, "Let's go together. We can look after each other on the road. If we go together, it'll be easy for the soldiers behind us to catch up. Don't worry, you sit in the carriage. I'll go down first, and the coachman will take you to a hidden place to enter Babeo Street. When the time comes, we'll meet there. Everything has been arranged for us to leave the city, so there won't be any problems." Hearing that he didn't have to get off the carriage, Yi Ke relaxed and didn't stop Yi Mei. Yi Mei let the coachman stop by the side of the street. She grabbed her bamboo hat and hid her face before disappearing into the night. The coachman continued to pull Yi Ke forward. Yi Ke's figure could no longer be seen on the street. Yi Mei looked at the carriage that had disappeared, and her lips slowly curled up under her veil. She followed the other end to a small house and knocked on the door. Not long after, someone came to open the door, and Yi Mei quickly dodged in. In the darkness, the man asked, "Is everything settled?" Yi Mei nodded. On the other side, Yi Ke was sitting in the carriage. After Yi Mei got off, the coachman's speed became faster and faster. Gradually, the sounds of the soldiers catching up gradually weakened. Yi Ke's heart was slightly comforted. When he could no longer hear the sounds of the soldiers, he felt a little uncomfortable from the bumpy ride and said, "We can slow down a little." The coachman turned a deaf ear to him and continued to drive the carriage quickly. Yi Ke was a little dissatisfied. He lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. He was surprised. How was this still a city? This was clearly a mountain. It was precisely because the mountain road was rugged that it was more difficult to jolt. Yi Ke jumped in fright. Only then did he remember that even Babeo Street was not this far away. Why did the carriage driver drive the carriage here? He said, "Don't walk any further. Go back to Babeo Street." The coachman ignored him and continued forward. Yi Ke was furious, but he was afraid of shouting for the soldiers. Just as he was about to speak, the carriage gradually stopped. Yi Ke was stunned, and then understood that the coachman was planning to stop the carriage. This coachman really didn't listen to orders. Yi Ke planned to go outside Babeo Street and teach this person a lesson. Just at this moment, the carriage stopped. There was a rustling sound from the front, and the coachman got off the carriage. Chapter 1083. Yiku opened the curtain and looked out of the carriage at him before scolding, "Why did you come down for? Still not bringing me to Baobao Street?" The coachman glanced at him, and only then did Yiku see clearly that the coachman was more muscular than an ordinary person. Even if a normal coachman needed to practice, he would not be as tall and muscular as this person. There was a faint feeling of uneasiness in his heart and he could not help but not dare to shout. Even though he was also a young male, he was not as tall as this person and his body was not as strong as this person. One feared that he would be at a disadvantage if they fought. That carriage driver went around to the back of the horse and took out something from his bosom. After looking at it for a long time, he suddenly stabbed it into the horse's buttocks. The horse was startled and suddenly raised its hooves and suddenly rushed forward. Yiku did not expect that the carriage driver would suddenly do such a move. The horse suddenly ran forward and he was thrown to the back of the carriage and was in a daze. His heart was filled with fear and Yiku suddenly realized something and suddenly opened the curtain of the carriage in front to look forward. The last thing that Yiku saw was a bottomless abyss and densely overlapped tree branches. The bottomless abyss seemed to be so deep that even if the carriage was smashed down, one could not hear the sound of it landing on the ground. The night covered for a while and only the wreckage of the carriage could be seen at the edge of the cliff. After a while, there was the sound of shoes stepping on the dead leaves and after a while, there were two pieces of clothing at the side of the carriage. No one heard Yiku's last cry of, "Older sister." Shin Miao was in the study writing with great speed. She wrote very quickly and her hands seemed to be moving instinctively. Ever since she locked herself in the study, her hands had not stopped. Mo Qing quietly stood behind her. Even though he did not know what she was doing, he did not make a sound as he watched her write quickly. It seemed that there were not only words but also some maps. After she finished writing, she let Mo Qing use the remaining warmth of the lantern to quickly dry the paper so that the words did not need to be wet. She would sometimes frown and sometimes ponder, making her look very dignified. Just at this moment, someone knocked on the door from outside. Mo Qing let the person in and it was Song Yang who was panting. Song Yang said, "Subordinate and Tai Yi followed Yi Mei and her brother. At the corner of the city, they parted ways. Tai Yi followed Yi Mei, subordinate followed Yiku. Yiku's coachman drove the carriage deep into the mountains and lured Yiku to the cliff. He set up a trap and the carriage fell off the cliff. Yiku had no way out. Broken cliff? Mo Qing was surprised and somewhat puzzled. Who is that carriage driver? What grudge do you have with Yiku? Song Yang rubbed his nose. I was in a hurry to come back and report, so I didn't pay attention to what happened to the coachman. Since Yiku is dead, this subordinate has returned. There is no need to investigate. The carriage driver is Yi Mei's people. Shin Miao said. Yi Mei. Song Yang was startled. Yi Mei had the driver kill Yiku. But Yiku is her brother, and since she wanted to kill him, why did she bring him along when she escaped? When escaping, naturally a target is needed. Yiku is Yi Mei's blood-related younger brother, so it was most suitable to be a target. I think that the coachman not only killed Yiku, he also placed Yi Mei's and Yiku's clothes at the cliff, so that people would think that both siblings fell off the cliff and died. When Mo Qing and Song Yang heard it, they were surprised for a moment before coming to a sudden realization. Yi Mei should have found an escape route from the beginning, but she was afraid that she would be chased like a stray dog, and there would be a day when she would be caught up. It would be better to let the world think that she was already dead. No matter how idle the soldiers were, they would not go and kill a dead person. Yiku was her younger brother, and according to normal people's hearts, they would definitely think that she would be with her younger brother when she escaped. At the cliff, they would see her younger brother and Yi Mei's clothes. Those soldiers were personally following her younger brother, so they would definitely think that Yi Mei was also in the carriage. Naturally, they would think that both siblings had mistakenly fallen off the cliff and died. Chapter 1084. Yi Mei made Yiku her scapegoat and also helped her solve the later troubles. That is her biological younger brother. Song Yang sighed. If it was a male then so be it, but as a female, she can be so vicious and merciless. One fear that in her heart, Ye Ke had long been an abandoned chess piece. Shen Miao said without much care, so to use Ye Ke till the end when he is alive, it is also her ability. This was Mei Furen's ability, and in her life, it was only the icing on the cake. For example, in the past life, Ye Ke's existence allowed her to have more power in the inner palace, thus she had a deep sibling relationship with Ye Ke. At this point, Ye Ke could not bring her any benefits, and would even drag Ye Mei down, so Ye Mei did not hesitate to kill him. A flutter sound was heard from the window and a snow-white pigeon flew in and landed on Song Yang's shoulder. Song Yang took out the note from the pigeon's leg and quickly unfolded it. After reading it, he said anxiously, Tai Yi said that Ye Mei and the previous Jin Xingming had already reached the pier and seemed to be going by water. Looking at the strong winds outside, it seemed like it was going to rain and said, if it were to rain tonight, it would be difficult to catch up after they go out to sea. Now this subordinate and Song Yang will go over and bring them back to Furen. No. After finishing this sentence, Shen Miao had just finished writing on the last piece of paper. She burned that piece of paper on the lantern and kept it in an envelope. Then she said to Song Yang and Mo Qing, Song Yang, you are from the MOU army. Find a few agile people from the MOU army to bring this letter and follow behind Ye Mei all the way to Mingqi. Mingqi? Song Yang frowned. Why would they go to Mingqi? Mo Qing had heard that Jin Xingming has a friend whose business is doing well in Mingqi and recently there were frequent visits. It was obvious that he had the idea of going to Mingqi. Moreover, only by going to Mingqi, Ye Mei would be able to completely escape and not be discovered by the officers. She said, all of you also follow along. Pay attention to Ye Mei's personal belongings, like a box or something hidden. Be careful not to be discovered by others. Once that secret thing is discovered, change the thing inside and change it with the thing in this letter. She handed the letter to Mo Qing. Mo Qing received the letter. Although he was somewhat puzzled, he still agreed. Be quick, don't let anyone find out, Shen Miao urged. But just let them go to Mingqi like this. Song Yang said, did Furen not see them as enemies all along? It is true that we are enemies, but this is not letting them go, Shen Miao coldly said. On the contrary, this is sending them to the Yellow Springs. Go quickly. If it's possible, it's best if you can exchange the items before they board the ship. It would be troublesome to change after boarding the ship. No matter when they are replaced, leave 2 people behind to continue following them. Keep in touch with them at all times. If there are any other orders, I will let them know. When Mo Qing and Song Yang saw that Shen Miao was speaking in a serious manner, they did not dare to lower their guard and quickly left with the letter. Shen Miao held the table with one hand and tightly pursed her lips, but there was a flash of killing intent in her eyes. She really hoped that Mei Furen would die, and before that, she only wanted to take Mei Furen's life as soon as possible, so that there would be no more dreams. But now, she didn't think so. Heroes were vying for supremacy under the heavens and everyone wanted a piece of the emperor's soup. The Great Liang wanted it, the Qin country wanted it, and the Ming-Chi also wanted it. Fu Xiuyi would definitely think of ways to join forces with the Qin country, and at that time if Xie Jingxing were to go into battle, it would definitely be a tough bone to chew. With the enemy in front of one's eyes, one would have to erase them, but before that, it would be better to make the best use of everything. Dogs biting each other, would it not be good? Chapter 1085. No one understood Ye Mei's schemes and selfishness better than Shen Miao. A person who could even abandon her own younger brother, how would she make a losing deal? Ye Mei wanted to get something from the Yi family to compensate her. Gold and silver jewels were far from enough, what she wanted was eternal power. Yi Maokai had been in the Great Liang for so many years, and other than the Yi residence's reputation and wealth, the most important thing was the dirty secrets of the Great Liang court. Perhaps it was the imperial families or the courtiers. With secrets, there would be weaknesses. These secrets were most likely Yi Maocai's hands to use against the other officials, or perhaps it was the evidence that he had carefully collected. But one thing was certain, these things were very important to the Great Liang court. If one were to say it was more important, it could even cause the destruction of an imperial court. And this was exactly what Yi Mei needed. Yi Mei could use this as a stepping stone to the high-ranking officials and nobles of Ming Qi, but Shen Miao's design was more luxurious, a stepping stone to the imperial family. If Fu Xiuyi was able to obtain these, he would definitely be very happy, and Yi Mei, this kind of enchanting beauty, would definitely grab this opportunity and, like in the previous lifetime, nibbling away at Fu Xiuyi's heart step by step. But what if these things were all fake? Military defense map, secrets between the courtiers, discord between the imperial family, weaknesses that could be breached. All these things looked as if they were the key to Ming Qi's victory over the Great Liang. But what if all these things were fake? Ming Qi would fall into a wrong judgment, deploy troops in the wrong place and use the wrong methods to sow discord. At the end, success or failure would be achieved and the great cause would be destroyed. This was the logic of 1,000-li dike being destroyed by an ant's nest. Of course, Yi Mei did not know that she was holding the wrong things. Of course, Fu Xiuyi could also doubt the authenticity of the things that Yi Mei took out. But it did not matter. Shen Miao believed in Mei Furin's ability. She was a very powerful woman, so at the end, Fu Xiuyi would definitely believe Yi Mei's words. Therefore, in the end, the outcome of this battle was also predetermined. It was not that Shen Miao did not want to kill Yi Mei, nor did she deliberately release Yi Mei like a tiger back to the mountain. But she wanted to see the woman that Fu Xiuyi loved the most in his previous life walk towards him step by step like in his previous life, throw herself into his embrace, and finally personally send a big gift to send Fu Xiuyi to a dead end. He felt even more relieved. The most important thing was that this matter was beneficial to Xie Jingxing. Because of this small chess move, the world had undergone earth-shattering changes. It was really too good. That night, it was as what Song Yang thought. After midnight, there was finally a violent storm, and it was only until the morning of the second day that Song Yang and the other two returned and were all drenched. Yi Mei and Jin Xingming had already boarded the boat to the Great Liang, and it was as Shen Miao had guessed. Yi Mei had a silver box that was tightly hidden that even Jin Xingming did not know about it, but she herself had not opened it before. The people from the MOU army exchanged the things in the box with the things in Shen Miao's letter, and Tai Yi took out a stack of things from his bosom and handed it to Shen Miao. Shen Miao flipped through it, and it was not different from what she had expected. It was indeed something that Yi Maocai had collected over the years to threaten and balance the other courtiers. There were even some secrets of the royal family. She thought about it and decided to let Xie Jingxing deal with these things after he returned. The people of the MOU army had already followed Yi Mei to the Great Liang and were paying close attention to Yi Mei's movements, but there was nothing for the time being. Chapter 1086. Shen Miao then thought of Yi Hongguang and let Mo Qing and the rest while she went to the room next door to see Yi Hongguang. Gao Yang was still around and said to Shen Miao that Yi Hongguang's life was saved, but he had yet to wake up. No one knew how he would look like after he woke up and whether it would repeat in the future. After all, his injuries were too serious. If it was not for Mo Qing and Song Yang who brought him over from the Yi residence in time, one did not know if he would be able to keep his life. Finally, Gao Yang glanced at Yi Hongguang on the bed and asked, "What do you plan to do now?" His Majesty clearly wants to deal with the Yi family, yet you brought the Yi family's young master to your own residence. Could it be that you want to raise him in the future? What plans does the emperor have for the Yi family? Shen Miao asked. What other plans could I have? Gao Yang smiled. Cutting the grass and not leaving the roots. He then said, "Don't tell me you sympathize with me." Of course not. Your Majesty did the right thing. The Yi family and the Lu family were dealt with cleanly. Only then would the court be more stable. But she glanced at Yi Hongguang. This child has nothing to do with what Yi Maokai has done. If he's in the wrong, it's just because his surname is Yi and he was born in the Prime Minister's residence. Let's just wait and see. We still don't know if he can survive and what he will look like when he wakes up. If possible, I would like to ask the Empress for a favor. You're really strange. Gao Yang was puzzled. Why are you so benevolent towards this young master of the Yi family? Initially in Mingqi, one did not see you having such a good heart. What's so special about this young master Yi that you treat him differently? Because of his face. Shen Miao smiled. Face? Gao Yang looked at Yi Hongguang's face for a long time but couldn't see anything special about it. He waved his fan and said, I don't understand. Never mind if one do not understand. Shen Miao said, after all it is not a serious matter now. She lowered her voice, Xia Jingxing is going to go on an expedition to Mingqi. Gao Yang suddenly turned back and looked at Shen Miao, as if he wanted to say something but in the end he did not say anything and just looked at her without speaking. I knew this day would come, but I didn't expect it to come so soon. Although he said that he would be in Ruyang during this period of time, the matters in Ruyang were almost done. Even if they wanted to deal with the remaining forces, they might not necessarily need him. On the other hand, Long Yi is at the forefront of the situation, but he isn't there to hold the fort. Shen Miao sighed, moreover dealing with the Yi family is too sudden. Your Majesty. Is it not good? Actually, I should lie to deceive you, but I don't think I can deceive you. I am afraid I will make you unhappy. Gao Yang said, if I make you unhappy, Miss Luo will be angry with me. You're right, the emperor is in a bad state. The prince should have already told you about the imperial edict. Now His Majesty is instructing his own confidants to send some people to follow Prince to Mingqi. He paused before continuing, or perhaps it should not be going to Mingqi. The spies in the Ding capital had already sent back news that Fu Xiuyi had already reached an alliance with the Qin Emperor and took the initiative to attack the Great Liang. If the Great Liang was conquered, the two of them would divide it 50-50. He has a big appetite and is not afraid of choking. Shen Miao sneered. Fu Xiuyi, this person, most likely had an appetite after gaining power and influence. Before that, he was respectful to the Great Liang people and had a gentle attitude. Now that he allied with the Qin country, he dared to have such ambitions. He is also not considered arrogant. Gao Yang smiled. If one looked at it seriously, one would discover that the smile was somewhat dignified. He said, previously the Lu family and the imperial family were fighting. Even though the Lu family was eradicated cleanly, outsiders saw that the imperial family did not expend much effort and even had more than enough energy, but in fact there were many losses. Moreover, the Lu family could be considered as a powerful military force of the Great Liang. Now at this critical juncture, the Great Liang's military force is not much different from the Qin Ming. One need to meet force with force. But the most important thing is that Fu Xiuyi knows of the emperor's illness, so he can destroy our morale at any time. I believe in the prince of first rank in this battle, but it will definitely not be simple. Gao Yang said. I have never thought that this battle would be simple. Shen Miao was disappointed and frustrated. It is very difficult to fight a war. That is why the prince of first rank will lead the troops, but now that Ming Qi's side had already made their move, there are frequent incidents at the borders. Currently it is only a small skirmish, and not long later, they will officially declare war. The prince of first rank does not have much time, so recently he has been preparing. He did not want to tell you, possibly fearing that you will be distracted. Shen Miao was silent for a moment before saying, I understand. So, will you follow him to Mingqi? Gao Yang asked. Shen Miao tilted her head and laughed, can I? Why not? Shen Miao looked to the front and lightly said, one do not know when the emperor's illness will flare up, and one do not know when this battle will end. At that time, if the emperor really met with an accident, he would definitely announce the succession of the throne to the world. The Empress cannot leave her own country as she is responsible for the people under the heavens. I am not that great, but do not want him to carry the name of an incapable ruler. In terms of reputation, he is already aggrieved enough. So, I will guard the great Liang's territory for him first. Chapter 1087. 2 days after Yi Mei and her brother escaped, Emperor Yongle used the Yi family's collusion with Lu Jingchun to participate in the rebellion and massacred the entire Yi family. It was easier to deal with the Yi family than the Lu family. The Lu family was the Yi family's reliance, and once the Lu family fell, a Yi family would not be able to stir up any waves. Even though Yi Maokai had many connections and followers when he was alive, but under Emperor Yongli's iron fist, everyone could see it clearly and grew fearful, not daring to be as unbridled as before. Yi Maokai was personally convicted by Emperor Yongle and was beheaded at the Meridian Gate. Speaking of which, Yi Maokai was not wronged. Shen Miao took out the things that she exchanged from Yi Mei and picked out the things related to the imperial family to give to Empress Xianda. In order to restrain the imperial family, Yi Maokai secretly did a lot of things. These things became important evidence to convict the Yi family. Beheading at the Meridian Gate, this time the imperial family's prestige was very big. And the MOU army that followed Yi Mei and Jin Xingming also sent back news from time to time that their escape was very smooth. Most of the people believed that the newly recognized siblings of the Yi family died at the cliff. The reason was that they did not see the road clearly when they were escaping at night and fell down the cliff in a panic, dying without a complete corpse. Even though the great Liang's officers and soldiers continued to search, they did not find any traces of the two of them. Outsiders all said that no one from the Yi family survived, but there was only one person, and that was Yi Hongguang. Shen Miao let Mo Qing handle it, but Yi Hongguang had not woken up until now. Gao Yang said that whether he could wake up depended on Yi Hongguang himself, and he might sleep for the rest of his life. As for Xie Jingxing, he returned on a rainy night. A burst of autumn rain and a burst of cold. Shen Miao was reading a book under the lamp and the raindrops made a small sound on the window as the weather gradually turned cold. The tea on the table quickly turned cold. The door was pushed open with a creak, and some of the cold wind and rain came in. Shen Miao turned her head back and saw Xie Jingxing closing the door and walking in. His clothes were somewhat wet from the rain, and after taking off his outer clothes, he saw Shen Miao staring at him in a daze. His lips could not help but curl up as he walked over to her side and pinched her face. Not good. My Furen has become silly. Shen Miao pushed his hand away. Why did you only return now? You did not even send a message. Xie Jingxing had left for a few days and did not even send a message. Even if Shen Miao had a good temper, she was also somewhat annoyed. At the very least, he had to report that he was safe. No one in the mansion knew of his whereabouts. It was really troublesome. It was a smile that was not a smile. If one knew that Furen would not return, one would not know of Furen. He held Shen Miao's shoulders and said with a smile that was not a smile, if one knew that Furen missed me so much, I should have returned earlier. If Shen Furen, he said with Shen, Xie Jingxing thought about it and put on a righteous look. How about this? In order to compensate Furen, I will let you do whatever you want today and will not struggle. Shen could not help but laughed. May you are sick. Xie Jingxing saw her smile before saying, coax it well. But I heard one thing when I came back. He looked at Shen Miao. You let Yi Mei escape. I didn't let her go. Shen Miao said, she wanted to go to Ming Qi and even stole the secrets of the great Liang that Yi Maokai had gathered. One think that she wanted to rely on this to seek refuge with the nobles of Ming Qi. I replaced her things and also gave her some military defense maps and the like. I think it will be more useful. Maybe with this, she can even become an empress. Xie Jingxing was slightly surprised for a moment before he understood her meaning and blinked his eyes. Furen's move is very vicious. Chapter 1088. Yi Mei happily took these precious things to look for the nobles in Mingqi. As long as the nobles were not stupid, they would use their connections to present this thing to Fu Xiu-yi in exchange for the world's meritorious services. But who would know that this military defense map was drawn by Shen Miao? If Fu Xiu-yi were to fight against it, one fear that one would not even know how one died. Shen Miao raised her brows. I am a poisonous woman with a heart of snakes and scorpions. So what? Very good. Xie Jingxing leisurely said, I like poisonous women. Those were the things that I gave to Yi Mei. Afterwards I made another copy that is exactly the same. Shen Miao said, later I will pass it to you. Mingqi and the Great Liang will eventually go to war. At that time, with this thing, you will be able to know what Mingqi's plans are, and it would be better to get twice the results with half the effort. She thought about it and added, it is best to give Fu Xiu-yi some sweetness in the beginning and let him think that those things are real. After testing the truth and falsehood, he would definitely increase the manpower that was arranged. At that time it would be more cost-effective to beat him at his own game. Xie Jingxing smiled, you are quite good at calculating. When are you leaving? Shen Miao asked. After a moment of silence, Xie Jingxing then said, you know about it? You think that you can hide it for a long time? Shen Miao sighed. Seeing that Xie Jingxing did not speak, she smiled instead and said, yes. She poured a cup of tea and handed it to Xie Jingxing, with tea replacing wine. I wish you success. Xie Jingxing was startled for a moment before he took the tea and looked at Shen Miao. If you win, remember to give me a wish when you return. She said. What wish do you want? Xie Jingxing raised his brows and there was a deep smile in his eyes. Shen Miao thought about it, at first. I have not thought about it yet. Wait till I have thought about it before telling you. Xie Jingxing snapped his fingers, I also have a wish and you must satisfy it now. What? He carried Shen Miao on his shoulders and walked to the back, accompany me to take a bath. Shen Miao, the flowers in Wei Yang Palace had withered a lot. The flowers that were dense in the spring and lush in the summer would wither in the autumn, looking especially gloomy. However, the palace maids found some chrysanthemums. Big purple, white, and yellow flowers were already showing signs of blooming. It seemed like they could melt away the loneliness a little. However, autumn was already harsh, how could it be changed by a few pots of flowers? The autumn rain drifted in, and some of it drifted into the house. Tao Gugu closed the window and fiddled with the small stove a few times before quietly retreating. Emperor Yongle reclined on the couch. He was actually very handsome, but his face was usually cold and expressionless, so his handsomeness was overlooked by others. What the people saw was the cold indifference of the emperor and his deep schemes. Without the identity of Emperor Yongle, no one knew what kind of person Xie Qi was. Perhaps, there were two exceptions. One was Prince Rui, Xie Yuan, and Empress Xianda was also one of them. The former Empress Dowager Jingxian could also be counted as one, but she had already passed away, so it was useless to talk about her now. Empress Xianda was brewing flower tea. There were flower petals and the first snow that was buried under the tree last year. A spoonful of honey was placed in it and a small fire was slowly lit. A sweet fragrance was emitted from the small pot. It was accompanied by a stack of osmanthus flower cakes that were just taken out of the imperial kitchen. It was warm and sweet, making one's heart sweet. Empress Xianda picked a cup of tea and handed it to Emperor Yongle. Chapter 1089. Last year, this Chia and Qiushui picked the first snow together. Empress Xianda tasted it herself and smiled. It is very sweet. This year, when it snows in winter, this Chia will go pick it again. If your majesty likes, you can come and see. Emperor Yongle looked at her and was silent for a moment before saying, this winter, Zhen is still here and will accompany you. Empress Xianda's hand shook and a large drop of tea fell onto the back of her hand. She hissed in pain. Emperor Yonglu saw the situation and grabbed a handkerchief from the side. He pulled her hand and wiped it as he scolded, "Why are you so careless?" But the water did not dry, and instead increased. Empress Xianda cried. Her tears also fell onto the back of her hand. They were warm, and seemed to be hotter than the boiling tea. She said, "Your Majesty, why do you say such heart-wrenching words to make this Chia sad?" Emperor Yongli's movements paused and looked at her. "Qingzhen, ever since this Chia entered the palace, this position of Empress, I have been very sensible. What I know and what I do not know, I am very clear. Whatever your Majesty does, this Chia will not have any complaints. But even at this stage, does your Majesty still want to treat me like this?" Her words were all accusations, but her tone was very calm, as though even if she was full of grievances, she could not get angry at Emperor Yonglu. She said, "Your Majesty disdains to coax me, and wants me to stay awake until the last moment. But does your Majesty not know how painful it is to be awake?" Emperor Yonglu paused for a long time. After a long time, he picked up the handkerchief again and wiped the tears on the back of Empress Xianda's hand. He said, "Qingzhen, other than Imperial Mother, you are the only woman that Zhen has let down in this life. You are the only one that can stand by Zhen's side. Zhen also knows the feeling of being awake. Zhen has no other choice." Empress Xianda stared at the flower tea in her cup and said, "Emperor has decided?" "Zhen has decided. Imperial Mother once said that in the world, there are many heroes. Zhen cannot be a hero, but to be able to support the great Liang to this state in my lifetime, I am already satisfied with the Lu and Yi families. The rest of the journey was up to Xia Yuan. After that, Zhen cannot manage but," he paused before continuing, "Zhen still hope that it can be like what Mother Empress said, great Liang prospering, the world clean, the throne of the country lasting for 100 generations. Qingzhen," Emperor Yonglu sighed, "we do not know when we will fall, nor do we know when we will wake up again. If that day comes, you must accomplish what I have instructed you to do. After that, you can go and live the life you want to live. Whether you're sober or confused, as long as you're happy." Empress Xianda lowered her head and stroked the edge of the teacup. After a long while, she looked at Emperor Yonglu and a slight smile appeared on her face. She said, "Does your Majesty still remember the scented tea that Chia brewed for your Majesty to drink when we first met?" At that time, Empress Xianda's mother brought her into the palace to see Empress Dowager Jing Xian. Empress Dowager Jing Xian was originally choosing a wife for Emperor Yonglu. That day, there were also some young ladies from the other officials' families. They were all in the 4 arts and performed in front of Emperor Yonglu, but it was all for that high and mighty position. Yet she sat alone at the corner, smiling quietly and looking at everything indifferently, as if she did not care about all of it. No matter if it was the high and mighty Empress position, or the handsome young emperor, she did not pay any attention to them. Empress Dowager Jing Xian asked her if she had any talents. At that time, how did Empress Xianda answer? She said, "This official daughter is slow-witted and do not have any special skills. It is just that when I am at home, I occasionally brew tea for father and brother. Father and brother feel that it is very good." Chapter 1090. At that time, the other young ladies all had disdainful expressions. Things like brewing tea could be left to the servants. A noble young lady didn't know how to practice some skills and only knew how to brew tea. Did she really think she was a servant? Empress Dowager Jing Xian was very satisfied. Afterwards, Empress Dowager Jing Xian said to Emperor Yonglu, "I think Qingzhen is a good child. Brewing tea depends on her character. She is very steady and has a peaceful nature. She can be with you for a lifetime. Whether it's a big storm or a big wave, or a small stream flowing over a long period of time, she will gladly endure it. This is very good, very rare." Emperor Yonglu thought of Empress Dowager Jing Xian's words and couldn't help but look at Empress Xianda. Empress Xianda was blowing on the flower petals floating on the surface of the teacup. Ever since Empress Xianda entered the palace, it had been so many years. As Empress Dowager Jing Xian said, she was a calm person. She never asked much and didn't meddle. She just sat in silence. It was as though she was still the same as before, sitting in the corner with a cup of tea and a slight smile. Even with the passing of time, she didn't change. Empress Xianda detected Emperor Yong Li's gaze and smiled, "Your Majesty, let's not think about other things today. Since autumn is here, let's relax for once. Drink tea, play chess, play the zither, and write like before. Is that okay?" "Okay." Emperor Yonglu nodded. His answer was straightforward, and there was a slight smile on his usually cold and almost rigid face, which actually surprised Empress Xianda. She reacted and quickly stood up as though she was afraid Emperor Yonglu would change his mind. She said, "Then this Chia will go get the box of jade chess pieces that Jing Xing sent. After Jing Xing was sent here, Your Majesty has only played with this Chia once. It was a waste of a good chess piece." Emperor Yonglu laughed, "Let Tao Gugu go get it." "I don't know where she is." Empress Xianda said, "This Chia has hidden. Your Majesty, wait for this Chia here." She lifted her skirt and jogged to the back. Empress Xianda had always been quiet and gentle. It was rare for her to be like this. She showed a young girl's beauty that wasn't there usually. Emperor Yonglu looked at her, and as he looked at her, his gaze became somewhat pained. He frowned and coughed violently twice. He grabbed a handkerchief from his sleeve and covered his mouth. After a long while, he wiped the handkerchief away from his mouth. It was also clean, and nothing could be seen. The handkerchief was pinched in his palm, revealing a bit of captivating red in a crease. It was very eye-catching. He paused and put the handkerchief into his sleeve. Looking at Empress Xianda who ran out with the chess box, she smiled. As if nothing had happened. The following days were unusually peaceful. It was so peaceful, as if nothing bad had ever happened to him in the long run. It was as if the dust had settled after thousands of battles, and everything was stable and peaceful. Xia Jingxing and Shen Miao were in Longyi these days and would stroll around during the day or play zither and write in the residence. Occasionally when Xia Jingxing was in the mood, he would pull Gao Yang to practice and Shen Miao and Luo Tan would go to study other things. During the night, she would discuss with Xia Jingxing about the few military defense maps. Out of the two of them, one was good at attacking and the other was good at defending. When they were calculating, they had their strengths and weaknesses and were very in tune. Xia Jingxing was overbearing and could not stand the method of hanging the enemy to death. But being direct would inevitably have risks. Every time he argued with Shen Miao, he would overbearingly decide to slap the table and stand up. Shen Miao was too lazy to care about him. In the middle of the night, he would sneak back to the bed when there was no one around. When Shen Miao used words to choke him, Xia Jingxing would turn over and press her under his body, using another method to punish her. Chapter 1091. The days passed by slowly, but everyone knew in their hearts that they were only lingering to their heart's content before leaving. Once the war started, separation was inevitable and those days of separation would have to rely on these lingering memories to fill the gap. In the end, that day still arrived. On a night of rustling autumn rain, Ming Qi crossed the border between the two countries and launched an attack on the guards at the border. At the other end, the Qin country docked by water and went ashore from the fishing village in the northern part of the Great Liang and wantonly massacred the villagers. Using this as a stronghold, they went deep into the interior and launched an invasion. The war started. Ming Qi and the Qin country did it secretly or deceive the heavens, but in the end they did not disappoint the public. They were unable to restrain their temper and slowly plotted, but with great fanfare, it showed that they were very confident. Would the Great Liang fight or not? Naturally it was to fight. Prince Rui requested for the commander's order and Emperor Yonglu personally conferred the title of general and ordered 300,000 troops to lead the army out. This was not only a counterattack against the country that launched the invasion, but also a determination to break the situation and push the wheel of history forward in the long history of the three countries. Heroes vying for supremacy under the heavens, the situation was turbulent. Heroes stood tall and talented people came forth in large numbers. Since ancient times heroes were born in troubled times and it was the same for war. The morale of the Great Liang's commoners did not decrease. Even though they were panicking at first, seeing the imperial family as steady as Mount Tai and seeing the prince going to war in front of them, their hearts were filled with lofty sentiments and there was no trace of fear. The date of departure was set for tomorrow. Luo Tan looked at Gao Yang. In the days that she was in the Great Liang, she had experienced a lot of things with Shin Miao. There were some misunderstandings with Gao Yang before but it was resolved later on. Even though Gao Yang loved to tease others, he was not as modest as he looked on the surface, but he treated her well and was considered a good person. Luo Tan originally wanted to follow Gao Yang back to Mingqi, but previously she secretly followed Shin Miao to the Great Liang. Now that such a long time had passed and Fu Xiaoyi had started to deal with the Shin family, naturally he would not let off the Luo family. Luo Tan wanted to advance and retreat together with her family. But Luo Sui's letter told her to stay in Mingqi. Firstly, Luo Tan would not be able to help much after returning and perhaps she would be implicated, which would not be good. Secondly, Shin Miao wanted to stay in Longyi and with Luo Tan with her, there would be someone to take care of her. He could not return to Mingqi and indeed he could not leave Shin Miao alone in Longyi. Luo Tan could only stay here. He watched as Gao Yang started to organize his things. He put some medical books and medicine into boxes and had people carry them out one by one. Luo Tan sat on the chair, silently watching his every move. When Gao Yang was done cleaning up, he raised his head and saw Luo Tan staring at him without blinking. Feeling baffled, he asked, "Aren't you always noisy? Why are you so quiet today? Are you in a bad mood? You are leaving tomorrow." Luo Tan said, "On the road, you must protect the prince well." Gao Yang choked and said, "Me, protect him? He's more or less protecting me. You are his subordinate." Luo Tan said awkwardly, "Of course, you should pay more attention to yourself." Gao Yang was startled, but when he heard what she said, he smiled. Luo Tan would bully Gao Yang all the time and it was true that Gao Yang also loved to bully her. These two people would play around all day and it was difficult to have a good conversation. Luo Tan's character was careless and it was hard for her to admonish others about the details. It was already rare that she was able to say a few good words to Gao Yang. Gao Yang approached her and deliberately asked, "Pay more attention." "Pay more attention to what?" Chapter 1092. He was born handsome and usually had a gentle attitude. When he was near, his smile was somewhat mischievous. Luo Tan inexplicably blushed and pushed him away before snappily saying, "What else can I pay attention to? Of course it is to pay attention not to die. Don't you feel that it is good if I die?" Gao Yang waved his fan, "This entire Gao residence can be occupied by you. The servants inside will be at your disposal, gold, silver and jewelry can be used as you wish, and also those shops and farms." "Wait." Luo Tan felt that he was getting more and more excessive and quickly interrupted his words, "Who cares about your things? Our Luo family does not lack it. Moreover, do you think that I am a fool? These are your Gao family's things and what does it have to do with me? If you die, how can these things belong to me? You must be crazy." Gao Yang said, "What does it have to do with you? You do not know." "Know what?" Luo Tan was puzzled and probed, "Could it be that my father gave it to you? You are actually my father's people." She covered her mouth and said in a frightened voice, "My father sent you to monitor me?" Gao Yang, after a long while, he then sighed in resignation and knocked Luo Tan's forehead, "Normally you look quite astute, but how can you be so silly at this moment?" Luo Tan said, Hey, speak clearly first. Gao Yang suddenly placed a finger on Luo Tan's mouth and made a shoot action. Luo Tan was startled and felt that the place that Gao Yang's finger touched was slowly heating up until it gradually burned her face. What relationship do I have with you? You slowly think about it yourself. Tell me when I return. Gao Yang placed a medical book on Luo Tan's head. Now, help me tidy up this. Finishing, he turned around and started to tidy up. Luo Tan looked at his back, but unexpectedly, she did not explode in anger. She pursed her lips and actually obediently tidied up. Is it done or not? It's almost done, almost done. Ouch. Painful. There is still a little bit left. Do not be afraid. I will be gentle. Outside the door, Songyang, Imo Qing and Jingzhe and Guyu were flushed red to the ears. Jingzhe said, I remember that the clothes have not been aired. I will go and dry them first. Guyu quickly said, I will also help. Songyang also said, I'll go and dry my blanket too. Imo Qing fiercely nodded. The four of them instantly scattered like birds and beasts. Only Tai Yi, who was squatting on the tree, had a towering figure and was unmoving like a mountain. In the room, Xie Jingxing helplessly held his forehead. Shen Miao finally strung the last rope and patted his hand in satisfaction. Done. Xie Jingxing looked at the string of red ropes on his wrist and felt a headache coming on. Why would he tie up the rope worn by so many women for no reason? But Shen Miao was still supporting her cheeks and said with a smile, so many, how can it not be broken? Before he could speak, Shen Miao had already stood up with a bang and sat on his thighs, scaring Xie Jingxing. The wine jars in the room were all empty and the room was filled with the smell of alcohol. Shen Miao's face was flushed red from drinking and was as beautiful as a flower. It was rare for her to have a sweet smile as she held his face with both hands and kissed his face. Xie Jingxing was already calm. From the time Shen Miao got drunk till now, she had kissed him dozens of times. As long as Shen Miao was drunk, one would see a completely different female. How to say, it was like a lecher who molested a young lady. The dignified Prince Rui had lived for so long and had flirted with countless females intentionally or unintentionally, but there was only one female who flirted with him. Moreover, it was a heartless female who did not admit it after waking up. This new face is indeed not bad. Shen Miao said, can be a top courtesan. Xie Jingxing stared at her expressionlessly for a long while before saying, thanking Furen for the appreciation. Shen Miao was satisfied and said, reward you with some money. Take it to buy clothes. She felt around in her sleeves and took out something before throwing it into Xie Jingxing's hands. It was the jade token that Xie Jingxing gave her in Mingqi. Before Xie Jingxing could see it clearly, Shen Miao waved her hands again and again, no. I took the wrong one. This was given to me by my husband. She quickly took it back. Husband? He raised his eyebrows, you still remember that you have a husband. Shen Miao looked at him, recognize. My husband is better looking than you. Xie Jingxing, but he is going to go to war. She buried her head on Xie Jingxing's shoulder and found a comfortable position to nestle up. She yawned and seemed to be somewhat sleepy as she said in a daze, so I am drunk so that when he leaves, I will not be able to see him if I am still drunk and do not wake up. Why do not want to see him? Xie Jingxing frowned. Her voice gradually weakened, because I do not want him to be entangled in love. But if I see him leave, I will be reluctant. Speaking till the end, her breathing was even and long as she really fell into a deep sleep. Xie Jingxing found it somewhat funny, but at the end he gradually put away his smile. He lowered his head to look at the sleeping female in his arms and paused before softly saying, actually you can be more willful. Shen Miao did not answer his words. He carried Shen Miao and placed her on the bed and covered her with the blanket. He then stretched out his hand to hold her hand and sat by the bed. He did not do anything and only looked at her sleeping face as if he was satisfied with this. In the latter half of the night, Tai Yi knocked on the door. "Master, we can set off." He paused for a moment before leaning over and kissing the female's forehead. Then, he strode out of the door. After the door was closed, Shen Miao, who was on the bed, slowly opened her eyes. Reluctant to part. Reluctant to see him leave with a clear mind, but also reluctant to miss him like this. Parting was something that made one sad and reluctant to part with. To let him leave without any burden and then return like a hero. Footsteps sounded outside the door, light and steady. There were other people, but it seemed that no matter how one looked at it, one would be able to distinguish the one they wanted to listen to. The footsteps paused slightly when they passed by the room and then gradually faded away. The long night was about to pass and the sky was bright and a new day was about to arrive. She did not know how long she slept on the bed before she sat up. After waiting for a long time, Jingzhe came in with a basin of water. Seeing her sitting on the bed in deep thoughts, she said in surprise, "Furen is awake." "N." She answered, "I need to make a trip to the palace." Chapter 1093. Xie Jingxing had only traveled for a short 10 days, but the days seemed to pass much slower than when he was here. It was clearly the original residence of Prince Rui, but no matter how one looked at it, something was not right. The Mou army left some guards in the residence of Prince Rui to protect the safety of the residence. Tai Yi followed Xie Jingxing and left together. There was also Gao Yang. Ji Furen did not intend to let Ji Yushu go. After all, the Ji family only had this one seedling. Who knew that Ji Yushu had a free and easy temperament and left with a letter before mixing into the army? When Ji Furen found out and wanted to chase after him, she was stopped by Ji Darren. Ji Darren said, "Ji Yushu is always reckless and ignorant, it is good to let him sharpen his will." Thus in Longyi City, almost all the people who had a good relationship with Shen Miao seemed to have left in one night. After Gao Yang left, the Gao family sent his junior brother to treat Yi Hongguang. Yi Hongguang still did not wake up and kept sleeping soundly. Luo Tan also seemed to have grown up a lot in one day and no longer went out to play with cats and dogs or walk the streets. Occasionally she would stop and be concerned about the situation at Ming Qi's side. In the beginning, Luo Tan was tangled with the battle between the Great Liang and Ming Qi, thus Shen Miao told her about all the things that happened in Ming Qi, including Fu Xiuyi, Emperor Wen Hui, and even the suppression of the Luo and Shen family. The more she heard, the more silent Luo Tan became, and in the end she did not say anything. Shen Miao also did not go and persuade her. There were some things that one would slowly think clearly, and it was only a matter of time. The days were much calmer and the commoners in Longyi City did not have any signs of panic. Perhaps it was because they had confidence in their soldiers, or perhaps it was because they were used to singing and dancing for many years that they did not have much of an impression of war, thus they did not feel any fear. Shen Miao and those noble Furens in Longyi had a very good relationship. Naturally, there was a result of her deliberately winning them over, and those Furens were also very smart. The biggest threat to the imperial family, the Lu and Yi family, had disappeared from the world, and now the Great Liang was ruled by the imperial family, and the residence of Prince Rui was also a relative of the imperial family. Shen Miao was also on good terms with Empress Xianda, so naturally they would rush to please her. Speaking of Empress Xianda, Shen Miao often visited her in the palace these days. Shen Miao liked to talk to Empress Xianda as Empress Xianda was a talented female. In Shen Miao's previous life, it was because she was an empress that her horizons were broadened. The two of them talked about the past and present, from anecdotes to the current situation of the world, and their opinions were surprisingly in agreement. Empress Xianda also liked her. Every time they talked about her, time seemed to pass very quickly. On this day, Shen Miao was going out again and planned to enter the palace to see Empress Xianda. The closer it was to autumn, the colder it got. Uncle Tang carried a bowl of sheep milk soup in. Most likely it was because Xie Jingxing had left that Uncle Tang was very idle all day. Other than occasionally being instructed by Shen Miao to handle the matters of the shop, most of the time he had nothing to do. So he thought of a way to prepare some meals, saying, when master comes back and sees that madam has lost weight and is haggard, he will definitely blame this old servant. Why don't you let this old servant make some food for madam? It's good for your health. Jingzhi said, this goat milk smells so fragrant. If it was another household's goat milk, the soup that is made would be more fragrant and sweet. Uncle Tang said, after madam eats this bowl, when she goes to the palace, her heart will be warm, and she won't catch a cold on the way. He took another look outside and said, the weather has turned cold these past few days. Shen Miao smiled, many thanks Uncle Tang. She picked up the bowl and took a sip. She had only taken a sip when she felt her stomach churning and almost wanted to vomit. She suddenly put down the bowl and covered her mouth as she frowned. Chapter 1094. Gu Yu and Jingzhi jumped in shock. Uncle Tang quickly asked, what is the matter with Furen? Shen Miao shook her head, most likely one caught a cold last night and smelled the sheep milk. This time I cannot eat it and it is better not to drink it. In this case, Uncle Tang muttered, go back and get the servants to bring some medicine back. Then Furen should not drink the sheep soup first, otherwise it will be uncomfortable. Let the kitchen make some light soup later. Shen Miao nodded her head and grabbed the cloak before speaking to Jingzhi and Gu Yu, let's go. Mo Qing and Song Yang had already prepared the horse carriage outside. Both of them did not follow Xie Jingxing to Ming Qi as Long Ye's end was not without worries. Both of their martial arts were strong and Shen Miao could use them easily, so they stayed in Long Yi and listened to Shen Miao's instructions. When they entered the palace, Empress Xianda was waiting for her in the Wei Yang Palace and smiled, today you came a little late. There was some trouble before coming out. Shen Miao smiled and asked again, is His Majesty's health better these days? Still not bad. Yesterday he even strolled with Ben Gong in the garden. But Empress Xianda smiled bitterly, perhaps he is lying to Ben Gong. Anyway, he always likes to lie to Ben Gong and would not say anything. Shen Miao paused before persuading her, His Majesty is also afraid that you will be worried and hope that your ladyship will not be worried about this as he is thinking of you. Perhaps. Empress Xianda smiled, let's not talk about these. Ben Gong obtained new tea leaves yesterday and the kitchen made osmanthus cake. There are records in ancient books that the literati of the previous dynasty would put tea leaves in the osmanthus cake to obtain the fragrance of the tea leaves. Together with the tea, it was called tea food. One felt that it was not bad and thinking that you are coming today, one would make it in the imperial kitchen. If His Majesty knew about it, one fear that Ben Gong would laugh at Ben Gong and Ben Gong could only thicken her face to look for you. Your ladyship is really thinking highly of this official's wife. Shen Miao smiled gently, this official's wife is from a military family and is naturally rough and do not know how to do such elegant things. Stop it, Empress Xianda rebuked, in Long Yi, even those scholars and officials who think they are knowledgeable are not as knowledgeable as you. If you are coarse, would it not be ridiculing the entire Long Yi civil officials? She handed the teacup to Shen Miao, quickly taste it, how about it? Empress Xianda liked to boil tea. She liked to watch the tea leaves boil in the water. The temperature of the water had to be just right, no more, no less. The timing had to be just right. As for the tea leaves, spring water, and honey, they were all knowledge. As the Empress, she did not seem to be impatient with these trivial matters. It seemed that it was because of this that his temperament had been tempered to be so mild. Shen Miao liked to stay together with Empress Xianda because of her peaceful temperament that made one feel that the years were peaceful and long. Shen Miao said, it is better to obey than to be respectful. She picked up the tea and took a sip. That tea was very fragrant and slightly bitter, but the aftertaste was dry and sweet. Just as Shen Miao was about to speak, she suddenly felt nauseous and her hands trembled and half a cup of tea fell over. She covered her mouth and retched. Empress Xianda was surprised for a moment and quickly took the tea from her hands. Seeing that her expression was not good, she asked, "What is the matter? Is there anything uncomfortable?" Shen Miao felt that the churning in her stomach had calmed down a little before she shook her head. "Nothing. Apologies, your ladyship. Really sorry. Recently it is most likely that I have caught a cold and keep feeling uncomfortable in my stomach. Today, when I went out, it was." Her voice suddenly stopped and an incredulous expression rose on her face. Empress Xianda did not understand at first, but after seeing Shen Miao's expression, she seemed to have thought of something and said in shock, "Could it be that you are?" Chapter 1095. Shen Miao clenched her fists before quickly releasing them. "This official's wife also do not know. Quickly call the imperial physician over." Empress Xianda stood up excitedly and called Tao Gugu, "Take Ben Gong's invitation and call the imperial physician over." Shen Miao looked at the tea on the table and her heart was shocked. She had been pregnant before, so she wasn't sure if she was pregnant or not. It was because Xie Jingxing had only left for a dozen days and her period was not accurate, thus she did not put it in her heart. She only thought that she had caught a cold. Who knew? Now that she thought about it, she felt that recently her appetite had become strange. But she still could not make up her mind. Shen Miao's heart was also somewhat excited. The word child was too far away for her. She was somewhat afraid that when the child came to this world, they would have to face the sufferings, joys and sorrows of others, and she was not omnipotent and could not protect them flawlessly. On the other hand, she was very eager for the arrival of the child. If it came, it would be the best gift that heaven had given her in this lifetime. The imperial physician quickly rushed over and Empress Xianda appeared to be more excited than Shen Miao, letting the imperial physician immediately take Shen Miao's pulse. The white-bearded imperial physician took Shen Miao's pulse and after pondering for a long time, he stood up and bowed to Shen Miao before bowing to Empress Xianda and said with a smile, "Congratulations, Qin Wang Fei. The pulse is like pearls and it is the pulse of pregnancy. One fear that Qin Wang Fei has been pregnant for more than a month and the Qin Wang residents will have another child." Shen Miao was still somewhat in disbelief as she asked, "Really?" It was rare for Empress Xianda to see Shen Miao in such a daze and laughed out loud. She pretended to be serious and said, "Qin Wang Fei is asking you if it is true. If there is a mistake, there will be heavy punishment." The white-bearded imperial physician smiled, "This old official does not dare to lie. If Qin Wang Fei does not believe, one can invite a few more to take a look." This was originally a joke but Shen Miao said, "All right. Then one will trouble to invite a few more to take a look." The imperial physician was so shocked that he could only stare blankly. Empress Xianda was overjoyed and knew that Shen Miao was not willing to believe and wanted to confirm it again and again. However, when she was pregnant, she also couldn't believe it. Thinking of himself, his eyes darkened, but he quickly regained his composure and said with a smile, "Then let's do as Princess Consort said and invite a few more imperial physicians over." Empress Xianda really took good care of Shen Miao and really invited several imperial physicians to take Shen Miao's pulse. The result of taking her pulse was exactly the same. Shen Miao was indeed pregnant for more than a month. This was really too coincidental. Xie Jingxing had just left and in less than 10 days, Shen Miao was already pregnant. No matter what, when he was alone, at least he wouldn't feel so lonely. However, it could also be even more lonely. Empress Xianda was overjoyed. Most likely in the entire imperial family, there were only Emperor Yonglu and Xie Jingxing, the two brothers. Emperor Yonglu did not have any sons and the Xie family did not have any juniors. The one that Shen Miao was carrying was the first of the younger generation in the Xie family. Empress Xianda sent someone to invite Emperor Yonglu over. When Emperor Yonglu heard the news, he was in disbelief. Empress Xianda said with a smile, "Think about it. In the future, there will be a little boy or little girl that will call you Imperial Bobo and call me Imperial Gugu. Isn't it interesting? What is interesting? Emperor Yonglu was still somewhat awkward. He really did not like Shen Miao, and because of Shen Miao, he even had a dispute with Xie Jingxing. But Emperor Yonglu had never changed Xie Jingxing's thoughts and could not do anything to Xie Jingxing, thus he had an attitude of looking at a femme fatale towards Shen Miao. You. Empress Xian De looked at him. This is considered a joyous matter for our imperial family. It would be good if Qin Wangfei can give birth to a few more in the future. The residence of the prince of first rank would be so lively. There was some envy in her eyes. Obviously Empress Xian De also liked children. Chapter 1096. Anyone could see the envy in Empress Xian De's words. Shen Miao paused and there was a flash of pain in Emperor Yongli's eyes. After a moment, he spoke, "Pack up your things tonight and move to the palace. This cannot be spread out and the palace will be able to protect you." Shen Miao was slightly startled. Empress Xian De also quickly said, "Correct." Even though Longyi City looks peaceful, but at this critical juncture, there cannot be any mistakes. This matter must be kept secret and outsiders must not know about it. As for Jing Xing's side, privately send a message to him. Your Highness the Empress. Shen Miao suddenly spoke, this official's wife has a request. Empress Xian De said, "Speak. Please hide this matter from your Highness." She said, "Your Highness is currently on a journey and if he knows about this matter, he will inevitably be worried. If it is used by people with ulterior motives, there will be a loophole. It is better to hide it." Empress Xian De and Emperor Yonglu looked at each other. Empress Xian De said, "You are not wrong. But Qin Wangfei, if you are not willing to tell Jing Xing, you will have to bear the pain and happiness of this child alone. One do not know when Jing Xing will return and you will have to endure a long period of loneliness." Ben Gong had seen many females and because of various reasons, they hid the news of pregnancy but the process was extremely aggrieved. You must be able to bear this aggrieved. This official's wife is not aggrieved. Shen Miao smiled gently and her hands subconsciously touched her lower abdomen. When she knew that she was pregnant, she felt that there was a little life in her body that was breathing with her. That was a wonderful thing. She said, "If the result is good, even if the process is hard, it is worth it." Good. The one who spoke was Emperor Yonglu. He looked at Shen Miao and said, "Since that is the case, do not tell him." Empress Xian De still wanted to say something but Shen Miao had already nodded slightly to Emperor Yonglu and said, "Many thanks to your majesty. Since that is the case, then forget it." Empress Xian De sighed, "But from tomorrow onwards, you will move to the palace. Ben Gong will say that you will enter the palace to accompany, so that those Furins will not look for you every now and then and delay your recuperation." This time, Shen Miao did not evade. It was indeed so. She was the only female in the residence of Prince Rui and even if there were some guards from the Mou army, it was inevitable that there would be some people eyeing her covetously. On the contrary, because of the matter between the Lu and Yi clans, the imperial family's prestige had reached an unprecedented level. It was indeed safer to live in the palace. For the sake of the flesh and blood in her womb, Shen Miao did not mind what she did. When Empress Xian De saw that she agreed, she immediately instructed Tao Gugu to look for a side hall that was closest to the Wei Yang Palace for Shen Miao to stay in. Because of this interruption, it was already night time when they returned. Uncle Tang heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that she was finally back. Luo Tan also returned from outside and was surprised and happy to know from Jing Zhiguyu that Shen Miao was pregnant. Uncle Tang was so happy that he did not know what to say. Shen Miao told them not to tell Xie Jingxing as it was the critical juncture of war and it would not be good for Xie Jingxing to be distracted. Uncle Tang nodded, but he still felt sad in his heart. He said that he was going to burn incense for Empress Xiao and let her know the good news. Luo Tan was very surprised and wanted to touch Shen Miao's lower abdomen but did not dare to. Finally she carefully placed her hand on it and felt for a long while before she said dispiritedly, "Why is there no movement? It has only been a month or so, how would there be any movement?" Shen Miao laughed in spite of herself. But Luo Tan looked at her, "Youngest Biao's sister, are you not going to tell Gu Fu and Gu Mu? If they knew about it, they would definitely be very happy." Chapter 1097. Shen Miao thought about it before shaking her head. Now father, mother and eldest brother are in a confrontation with Fu Xiu-yi. At this time, I am their weakness. If there is an additional child, it would be even more restrictive. Moreover, Xie Jingxing would reach Ming Qi sooner or later and would need to meet up with father and mother. If father and mother know about it, Xie Jingxing would also know about it. Luo Tan thought for a while and felt that it made sense. She said, "Even though they do not know, I as a Yumu know." She softly said, "Even though one do not know if it is a little nephew or niece, but thinking of a little meatball, one would feel like it." Luo Tan had been somewhat quiet these days. She originally had a lively temperament which made the people in the residence of Prince Rui somewhat surprised. Now she had finally regained the liveliness of the past. This can be considered as a joyous event these days. Uncle Tang smiled, "It is time to liven up." Someone patted her head, "Almost forgot. One should pay attention to some food. Now that Furen is recuperating, one must not make any mistakes. Also those stairs and the corners of the door must be wrapped with cloth." It was a vivid picture of nervousness. Shen Miao laughed in spite of herself. In the previous life when she was pregnant with Fu Ming and Wan Yu, there was no such treatment. Even consort Dong Shu only routinely asked if there was anything wrong with her and sent some tonics. If it was not for the Shen family's concern, one feared that Shen Miao herself would be in a mess. Now she was calm, but the people in the residence of Prince Rui were all extremely nervous. She smiled, "No need to trouble. Uncle Tang, you should also pack up. Because I am pregnant, her ladyship wants me to enter the palace. Leave some guards in this residence and leave some people behind. The important people will follow me to the palace." Uncle Tang was surprised for a moment before he seemed to understand Shen Miao's meaning and said, "Good, good. This old servant will go and arrange it." "Biao youngest sister, do I also need to go?" Luo Tan asked. "Naturally one must go. But I do not know the etiquette of the palace. Would it not be good?" Luo Tan asked. Shen Miao said, "How is it not good? Just show a few punches and kicks and everyone will know that your martial arts are high and will be wary of me, thus I will be safer. The safety of me and the child will depend on your protection. Cousin, don't tease me." Luo Tan blushed, "But you're right. 2 people is better than 1 person when I'm with you. I'll go with you to the palace." She stood up. "I'll go pack up first." After Luo Tan left, Shen Miao stood up. She didn't expect that she would be pregnant at this time, but she felt that everything was destined. Opening the window, the autumn moon was very bright, and it gradually began to form a full moon. In a few days, it would be the Mid-Autumn Festival. It was the Mid-Autumn Festival, but she was separated from her family. No matter if it was Xie Jingxing or Shen Xian, they were all not by her side. This year was destined to be a difficult one, but Shen Miao touched her lower abdomen. Because she had a child and because she had become a mother, she seemed to be able to appreciate the fullness of the moon. God would not be cruel to a person forever. At least for this moment, God was a good person. He gave Shen Miao a new life and also gave her a man she loved deeply and a brand new life. The past was in the past, and this was a completely different moonlight. She softly asked the child in her abdomen, "You see, you and father are looking at the same moon." Shen Miao moved into the palace. Empress Xiande treated her very well and gave her the side hall beside the Wei Yang Palace. Shen Miao still used her own servants, so it was not inconvenient. Usually, Empress Xian De liked to talk to Shen Miao and boil tea. Luo Tan also followed. Luo Tan had a lively temperament and Empress Xian De liked her a lot. Chapter 1098. The days passed very peacefully. If there was anything unexpected, it would be Yi Hongguang. Yi Hongguang was also brought into the palace. Because he didn't wake up for a long time, he woke up unexpectedly one day. But when he woke up, his mind was like that of a 3-year-old, and he didn't know anything. The imperial physician had taken a look at him. He was afraid that he had suffered too much shock and was close to going crazy. With that, Emperor Yonglu couldn't be bothered to care anymore. It wouldn't take much to raise a fool. Yi Hongguang spent all day catching crickets and butterflies in the garden. He was very happy. Sometimes when Shen Miao saw his and Fu Ming's faces, she felt that Yi Hongguang's life was as tragic as Fu Ming's. It was all because they didn't reincarnate into a good family and wasted their lives for nothing. Empress Xian De saw the heavy look in her eyes and thought that she was sad because of Yi Hongguang. She patted Shen Miao's hands and comforted her, "No need to be sad. Actually, this might not be a bad thing." Now that the Yi clan was gone, if he was sober and woke up to find out about this, who knew how sad his heart would be? Even if he didn't have any hatred, he would still be in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Moreover, when the emperor did things, the most important thing was to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, so he would definitely not let him live. Now that he's like this, even though he's a fool, he doesn't have to face those sad things. He can live a carefree life like a child forever. Isn't that great? Emperor Yonglu had once suspected that Yi Hongguang was pretending to be dumb, but the imperial physician had taken a look and sent people to spy on him. Yi Hongguang was really dumb. Most importantly, he was unable to walk. Because of this injury, his body was getting worse. It was unknown how long he could live and how long he could live. Perhaps Yi Hongguang's misfortune made Emperor Yonglu think of himself when he was young. He had also been poisoned when he was young, and he didn't know how long he could live. It was this similar experience that made Emperor Yonglu feel pity for Yi Hongguang and spared his life. However, Yi Hongguang was an idiot now. He didn't know that his life was in the hands of the emperor. He had already rolled around in Yama's palace, but he still smiled carefreely every day. However, not everyone in the world could be like Yi Hongguang, who lived like a child and laughed happily. 2 months later, Xia Jingxing reached the borders of Ming Qi and started to fight with the Ming Qi's army. At the same time, the Luo family army and the Shen family army met at the Hanggu Pass and the Qin army entered the pass. Qin and Qi joined hands and officially confronted the Great Liang army led by Xia Jingxing. War was always merciless. Once it started, it was not easy to end it. Moreover, the two countries were facing off against one country, so they were evenly matched. Shen Miao would study the military defense map that she had given to Xia Jingxing. In the beginning, she could not see any clues, but gradually, signs began to appear. It was like a chess piece that had a predetermined path and was moving forward step by step according to the path that the other party had planned. Shen Miao knew that if she did not guess wrongly, that military defense map should be in Fu Xiuyi's hands. The battle between Great Liang and Qin Ming, for the time being, no one could see who won and who lost. Xia Jingxing did not sweep away thousands of troops like in his previous lifetime. Admittedly, it was because the Qin and Ming did not join hands, and at that time the Great Liang first attacked the Qin country before destroying the Ming Qi. But there was another point that Shen Miao knew. Xia Jingxing had changed his strategy. He was like a shrewd and cunning hunter, luring his prey into his own trap. Catch everything in one net and not like to be entangled. Clean and efficient was indeed the style of the Xia family. Fu Xiuyi was taking the bait. At the same time Shen Miao was gratified by this, she could not help but admire Yi Mei's methods. Many things had changed, but she was still able to obtain Fu Xiuyi's heart and hand over the military defense map, making Fu Xiuyi trust her. Chapter 1099. Sure enough, not long after, Xie Jingxing's letter was sent back to the Great Liang. In the letter, there was the situation of Ming Qi. Emperor Wenhui passed away from illness and the 9th prince, Fu Xiuyi, ascended to the throne. Just as Fu Xiuyi ascended to the throne, he befriended the Qin emperor and obtained the support of the Qin emperor. Both countries launched an attack on the declining Great Liang together. The rest of the princes of Ming Qi, including Prince Zhou and Prince Jing, were already detained in prison. With Fu Xiuyi's methods, it was always easy to deal with his own people. The Shen family and the Luo family allied with the other old aristocratic families that were suppressed by Emperor Wenhui and openly rebelled, and were labeled as rebels in Ming Qi, but the commoners did not seem to buy it. The Shen family's reputation had existed for many years, and it was not so easy to tarnish it. Xie Jingxing's people were secretly in contact with the Shen family's people, and not long later, the Shen family would use the name of defecting to form an alliance with Xie Jingxing and officially turn against the Great Liang. At the end of the letter, Xie Jingxing had casually added a few sentences, as if it was a dispensable legend that he had casually added. It was said that there was an imperial family affair that was currently circulating in the Ding capital. A beauty came to the palace. She was the distant niece of an imperial merchant. She was as beautiful as a fairy and was intelligent. The new emperor loved her like a jewel and held her in the palm of his hand. He gave her the name Mei Furen, and in a short period of time, her influence far surpassed the other concubines in the palace. Shen Miao closed the letter and smiled. Luo Tan asked, "Biao Mei, isn't it just a letter? You read it over and over again for half a day and laughed 3 times. Suddenly she looked at the other side. Ai. How did the cat climb up? And he climbed so high. Not far away, on a tree in the garden, a black cat was climbing up the tree trunk. The higher it was, the thinner the branch became. It was as if it could not bear the cat's weight, swaying dangerously. The faster one climbs, the higher one climbs, the faster one falls and the more painful it is." Shen Miao smiled. "Slowly watch." Another half a year passed. Once a war started, it would not be easy to stop it. This was even more so for a war that involved 3 countries. Today, the flames of war were everywhere. Tomorrow, they would meet on the battlefield. There were wins and losses, retreats and advances. The Qin country and Ming Qi were practically cutting off all means of retreat to fight this battle, thus the investment was exceptionally high. In comparison, the troops and horses of the Great Liang could even be considered small. But even so, when Ming Qi and Qin country joined hands, they were not able to gain any advantage from the Great Liang. It was like a long seesaw battle. The Great Liang's side was wearing it down unhurriedly, but the Qin country's and Ming Qi's pace was gradually disrupted. Especially recently. In the previous battles, big and small, Qin Qi had always won, especially at the beginning. They were able to taste the sweetness of victory almost every single time. Although the harvest was not very bountiful, it greatly boosted their morale. The generals and soldiers of Qin and Qi were very proud. Towards the end, Qin and Qi appeared to have less and less of an advantage. Although there were victories, they were gradually showing signs of decline. All the way to the 13 capitals of Yuzhou. The 13 capitals of Yuzhou were located at the border of Ming Qi, Qin country, and Great Liang. It had always been the Qin country's territory, and as for why it was the Qin country's territory, one had to trace it back to a very long time ago, even to the beginning of the country. For so many years, the 13 capitals of Yuzhou had been standing steadily at the border. It was not because the Great Liang and Ming Qi did not have any thoughts, but because the 13 capitals of Yuzhou had a complex terrain that was easy to defend and hard to attack. If one wanted to attack, one would have to expend a lot of effort, and if it was not good, one would implicate oneself. This was such a hard bone to chew. Even if one wanted to chew, other than ambition, one must have great courage. Chapter 1100. Xie Jingxing led the great Liang soldiers and was about to launch an attack on the 13 capitals of Yuzhou. This battle was extremely important and could even be said to be the key to the entire war situation. If Xie Jingxing was able to successfully take down the 13 capitals of Yuzhou, he would be able to end the war in a shorter period of time. For the Ming Qi and the Qin country, it would be exceptionally smooth. On the contrary, if Xie Jingxing was unable to bite this bone, then it would only cause the great Liang army to suffer a great loss of strength. Not to mention dealing with the Ming Qi and the Qin country, it would be very difficult to resist the pincer attack of these two countries. Thus for this war, no matter if it was the great Liang, the Ming Qi or the Qin country, all of them had bet 120,000 points, almost gambling with their lives. When Empress Xiande was talking to Shen Miao about this matter, she was still joking with her. After all, the one leading the troops is your husband. How is it that until now, you are not nervous at all? Shen Miao smiled gently. This official's wife naturally believe in your highness. Xie Jingxing was indeed very cunning. Yi Mei's wrong military defense map was able to successfully reach Fu Xiuyi's hands and was even believed by Fu Xiuyi. This was undoubtedly due to her ability. But Xie Jingxing's role in it was not small. At the beginning of the war, Xie Jingxing had always won and lost neither lightly nor heavily, allowing Fu Xiuyi to gain some sweetness. In fact, those few victories did not give any substantial advantage to the Ming Qi and the Qin country, but it gave others an illusion that the Qin Qi was very powerful. In the long run, Fu Xiuyi would instead trust the things that Yi Mei sent. Even if the great Liang won a few more times, in Fu Xiuyi's eyes, it was just a coincidence. But he neglected that the battles that Xie Jingxing lost were all insignificant cities, and even though the cities that he won and defended were few, they were all extremely important. If one looked carefully, it was as if the dots were connected into a line, and there was a faint trend of joining forces. But Fu Xiuyi and the Qin emperor most likely would not notice this point, because in the recent few battles, they had small victories. The morale of the great Liang army seemed to be gradually declining, and their attacks became more and more fierce, as if they wanted to take down the other party in one go. Thus Fu Xiuyi placed extra importance on the 13 capitals of Yuzhou. From the current battle situation and the military defense map that Shen Miao drew, Fu Xiuyi seemed to be carefully arranging his own troops according to the map. There was nothing more delightful than this news. The more manpower and financial resources Fu Xiuyi spent on this, the greater the blow he would receive in the end. It was as if Xie Jingxing was trying to abduct a gambling addict. First, he would let him win some money, lose and win, making the gambling addict feel that his luck was not bad and his skills were not bad. Finally, the gambling addict would be determined and lose all of his Shen family's assets. At this time, Xie Jingxing would unhurriedly pull in the net and catch them all in one fell swoop. Naturally, the gambling addict would lose everything and lose everything. Fu Xiuyi had already started to take the bait. As for the emperor of Qin state, he was more cautious than Fu Xiuyi. Perhaps he had other arrangements in the 13 capitals of Yuzhou province. However, once Fu Xiuyi's side was defeated, to Xie Jingxing, it was not important what happened to the Qin country. It was as if he had opened up a gap and broken through them one by one, and the rest would be much easier. Luo Tan stretched out her hand and carefully placed it on Shen Miao's lower abdomen. Unfortunately, the news from the 13 capitals of Yuzhou can only be received by sending letters. But this little fellow grows very fast. Shen Miao lowered her head and looked at her lower abdomen. 8 months of days passed by peacefully like this. It seemed that there was no difference from the past. Even if it was a war, one could face it with a very peaceful attitude. Not only because of the trust towards her loved ones and lover, but also because she understood that there was a little life in her abdomen that was growing together with her. Chapter 1101. Because she had become a mother, she had become braver and stronger. She was able to take responsibility and calm down. Just as she was talking to Empress Xianda, Tao Gugu hurried in from outside. She seemed to be in a hurry, but she could not disguise the joy on her face. She said with a smile, "Congratulations, Nyang Nyang, congratulations, Qin Wang Fei." Just now, news came from the court. The 13 capitals of Yuzhou have sent news that His Highness Qin Wang has won. Really? Empress Xianda immediately stood up. She had always been calm, but at this moment, she was slightly at a loss. Aunt Tao nodded vigorously. Her Majesty is very happy. She is pardoning the world. Heaven bless us. Luo Tan clasped her hands together and murmured. The 13 capitals of Yuzhou had been conquered and news of victory had arrived. What did that mean? This meant that the war that had lasted for more than half a year would end soon. The soldiers would all be able to return home. On the other hand, this chaotic world would finally be unified. Perhaps the grand ambition of hegemony would come true soon. Shen Miao caressed her lower abdomen and there was joy in her heart. She knew that Xie Jingxing would be able to do it. That Tao Gugu smiled as she looked at Shen Miao. Prince Consort, do not be anxious. His Highness the Prince of First Rank also let someone send a letter over and in a while the messenger will send the letter to you. I'm so envious. Empress Xian teased Shen Miao, not sending a letter to Ben Gong and His Majesty, and just thinking of one's own daughter-in-law, one would bear the title of sibling in vain. Luo Tan also said, that's right, that's right. They don't even know how to consider the feelings of others. Don't be disappointed, Miss Luo. Perhaps Aunt Tao was in high spirits after a happy occasion. She continued to speak for the first time. There's also a letter for you. It seems that the young master of the Gao family sent someone to deliver it. Luo Tan was confused. Gao Yang. What kind of message did he send me? Shen Miao and Empress Xian looked at each other and smiled as they shook their heads. The good news of the 13 capitals of Yuzhou made everyone in Longyi very happy. Emperor Yongle even held an unprecedented palace banquet that he hadn't held for a long time. It was extraordinarily lively. Shen Miao did not participate in this palace banquet. Firstly, the fact that she was pregnant was not known to the public. She had been living in the palace. Although there had always been speculation outside, Empress Xianda had protected her very well. Later on, people's enthusiasm for it gradually waned, and they were no longer curious. Secondly, it was not suitable for the pregnant Shen Miao to participate in such an occasion like the palace banquet, and if something went wrong midway, it would not be good. Moreover, she wanted to go back early to read Xie Jingxing's home letter. Ever since Xie Jingxing's letters from home were shocking and the situation became tense, there were very few of them. Perhaps it was too troublesome to send a letter. He hadn't written to her in 2 months. Shen Miao opened the letter. There was nothing special in the letter. It was just that he was doing well and he proudly boasted about his own achievements and criticized Fu Xiuyi as worthless. It was said that other than Fu Xiuyi's skill in fighting for the throne, he was really messed up when it came to governing a country. Ming Qi's court was in a mess and there was no need to worry too much. Then he mentioned Mei Furen. It was said that Fu Xiuyi praised Mei Furen very highly and there were many people in Ming Qi's court talking about it. Previously Mei Furen could only be considered as moving unhindered in the inner palace. But in just a few short months, she was able to freely enter and exit Fu Xiuyi's imperial study. Fu Xiuyi seemed to not only see her as a beautiful female, but also as a lucky general. There were even a few victorious battles that were all thanks to Yi Mei. Now that Yi Mei was in the Ming Qi's court, she could get whatever she wanted. Other than Fu Xiuyi, she did not put anyone else in her eyes. Fu Xiuyi also indulged her. On one hand, he felt that she was beautiful and intelligent, and on the other hand, it was definitely because of Yi Mei's ability. Chapter 1102. It was just that when Xie Jingxing said all these, his words were filled with ridicule, simply treating Fu Xiuyi as a fool. Not only that, he even arrogantly claimed that everything was ready and was only waiting for the other party to walk into the trap. This time after the 13 capitals of Yuzhou won, at the Ding capital side, without needing him to take action, Yi Mei would be tortured to death by Fu Xiuyi. Fu Xiuyi's heart was not considered broad, and previously he personally praised Yi Mei as a blessed general in front of the court officials. Now that this blessed general made him suffer a loss in an important battle, how would Fu Xiuyi let it go? Of course, Xie Jingxing also arranged a little extra fun to create the impression that Yi Mei was a spy of the Great Liang and came to the Ding capital to get close to Fu Xiuyi to be a chess piece for the Great Liang. Fu Xiuyi was someone who could not tolerate betrayal, so naturally he would not spare any effort. Looking at Xie Jingxing's handwriting, Shen Miao could almost imagine his lazily biting the pen and gloating expression. She folded the letter but felt that there was something else in the envelope. She shook it and turned the envelope over. Sure enough, 2 red beans rolled out from the inside. Red beans, the most lovesick. He did not write lovesick words in the letter, but used 2 red beans to prove that he did not forget Shen Miao for even a moment. One really did not know if he was putting on airs or childish. Shen Miao thought about it and took out the sachet at the side and carefully placed the 2 red beans inside. The 5th letter. She said. Ming Qi, Ding Capital, Imperial Palace. In the gloomy dungeon, there was a thick stench of blood everywhere and it seemed to be mixed with other smells, making one feel nauseous. In the innermost part of the cell, a naked female was sitting on the ground. Her hands were shackled to the wall and her feet were submerged in the cold dirty water. There were some fat rats in the dirty water that would climb up and down her feet from time to time and gnaw on her toes. Some of her toes were bitten until they were badly mangled and the smell of blood seemed to attract those hungry rats as they gnawed even harder. To see one's own body being gnawed on by rats, not to mention a female, even a male would feel palpitations. However, this woman did not utter a single sound. Only she knew that it was not because she did not want to scream, but because her throat was already hoarse. Screaming would only cause more torment. This woman was none other than Yi Mei. In just a few days, it was as if she had fallen from heaven to hell. Yi Mei had never thought that she would have such a day where she would rather die than live. She did not expect Fu Xiuyi to be such a heartless person. She only knew that the 13 capitals of Yuzhou had been defeated, but she already felt something was wrong in her heart. But she felt that with her wisdom, it was not necessarily the worst situation and perhaps she could stabilize Fu Xiuyi. But Fu Xiuyi did not give her a chance at all. His heart was so cruel that he directly sent Yi Mei to the dungeon in front of the harem concubines. Then he tortured her until now, forcing her to say what other tasks the Great Liang had assigned to her. Yi Mei still did not know what had happened, she hoped to be able to explain. But this time her appearance was no longer her weapon. Because on the first day she entered the dungeon, Fu Xiuyi was very disgusted and ordered people to burn her cheeks with a red-hot iron. One of her eyes was even burnt because of this and could not be treated by a doctor in the dungeon, so she was considered blind. Yi Mei was never afraid. She was not afraid of a desperate environment and was not afraid of how bad the situation was. Even if she was trampled on, she would still be full of vitality and tenacious like weeds. The only thing she was afraid of was her own appearance. Because that was her only eternal weapon. Chapter 1103. This weapon was successful in every endeavor. With it, one could survive in a hopeless environment and reverse a bad situation. One could step on the people who trampled on her and live with ease. But once her appearance was destroyed, she would lose the connection to use others and things would become hopeless. She really felt hopeless and even lost her fighting spirit. She felt that no matter how the mouse gnawed on her toes, it would not be able to change anything. She was blind, and her cheeks were scalded. She could imagine how terrifying her current appearance was. She could tempt people to disregard their lives, and there was no lack of such people in the world. Even if one lost one's life, one would still pluck the fresh flowers on the cliff. But now that the fresh flowers had become weeds, and even weeds with scars, who would risk their lives to pluck it? Fu Xiu-yi was really ruthless. He and Yi Mei were entangled for so many days, and perhaps it was because he understood Yi Mei's ability to bewitch people that he might as well end it once and for all. He directly destroyed Yi Mei's appearance so that she would not be able to do anything. Yi Mei was very hateful. Footsteps came from outside, and it was exceptionally clear in the spacious dungeon. She turned her neck with some effort and used her remaining eye to look outside. Fu Xiu-yi stood outside. He coldly said, "Yi Mei, Jin will give you one last chance. Say everything that you know out." "What does this official's concubine know?" Yi Mei asked. She still called herself this official's concubine, as if this would prove that she was still Fu Xiu-yi's favored concubine and was like a fish in water in the inner palace of Ming-Chi. Fu Xiu-yi frowned in disgust as if he was disgusted by her ugly appearance and turned his head away. "Zhen have investigated everything clearly. Since you are a spy of the Great Liang, then you should have a channel to pass messages to them." Yi Mei laughed out loud. Her laughter was hoarse and no longer had the sweet and pleasant voice of the past, but was very ear-piercing. She also did not know why Fu Xiu-yi said that she was a spy. Perhaps Fu Xiu-yi only wanted to find a reason for his own failure. He himself had arranged the wrong soldiers but wanted to pin all the crimes on her head. She said, "Your Majesty would not believe whatever this official's concubine said." Then if this official's concubine were to say out the channel, would your Majesty believe or not? Or could it be that your Majesty feel that this official's concubine is also lying? If you speak, this Jin will grant you an intact corpse. Fu Xiu-yi coldly said. Yi Mei smiled. Now that she smiled, her appearance was terrifying, like that of a malicious spirit. Yet, she herself did not realize it, and even more coquettishly, she said, "Your Majesty, this business is too bad. What kind of condition is giving an intact corpse? If your Majesty is willing to let me live and think of a way to heal the wound on my face, I can consider telling you everything I know." Fu Xiu-yi did not get angry but laughed instead. "Those who betrayed Zhen have never lived. So your Majesty simply destroyed this concubine?" Yi Mei said. "One heard that at that time Rui Wang Fei was also bitterly in love with His Majesty and pursued endlessly. Unfortunately, His Majesty treated her as cold as ice, and afterwards the matter was left unsettled." Now that Fu Xiu-yi knew of Xie Jingxing's identity, he naturally knew of Shen Miao's identity. Mentioning Shen Miao, Fu Xiu-yi's face became even uglier. In his entire life, he was used to grasping everything in his hands. But it was Shen Miao who met with an accident. He thought that he could use Shen Miao's love for him to take over the Shen family, but Shen Miao met with a mishap and he was not able to take over the Shen family, causing him to go in a big circle. Now the Shen family was going against him, giving him a headache. Other than these, Shen Miao gave up on him and turned around to look for a better-looking person. This was practically slapping Fu Xiu-yi's face in front of everyone. Fu Xiu-yi was extremely angry, and now that he heard Yi Mei's reminder, it poked at his sore spot. Chapter 1104. I originally thought that Rui Wang Fei was just a little luckier and had a better background, thus she could accidentally become a Qin Wang Fei and live an enviable life. Now it seems that she was smarter than I imagined. Perhaps she had long known that by staying by your Majesty's side, no matter if she was loyal or not, there would only be one ending, and that is to die a horrible death. Yi Mei said. Presumptuous. Fu Xiu-yi said. I have lost to your Majesty. Yi Mei said, "Not long ago your majesty was still entangled with me in a loving relationship, but now you can personally make me into this state. Obviously know that one's appearance is precious to me, but make me suffer so much that I wish I was dead. But your majesty, let me tell you that you are not any better than me. You push all the blame onto me. Do you think that you will have a good ending?" Fu Xiuyi's face was livid. Anyone who was cursed like this would not be happy. Not to mention that he already hated Yi Mei to the bones. For Yi Mei to anger him at this time, it made him even angrier. "You will also not have a good ending. You are not their opponent. Shen Miao did not choose you in the beginning and chose Xie Jingxing, which also proved that in her eyes, you are not even 1% of Xie Jingxing. So you see, I have nothing now and am reduced to a prisoner, but your ending will not be better than mine. You will also be defeated. The 13 capitals of Yuzhou is just the beginning. After that, you will be utterly defeated. This Ming Qi's rivers and mountains will eventually be destroyed in your hands. At that time, you will just be a ruler of a subjugated country. I wish you that the army will be defeated like a landslide, and your Fu family's dynasty will finally be in your hands, unable to rise again for 100 generations." Fu Xiuyi coldly stared at her. "Have you finished speaking? Zhen has already given you one last chance." Yi Mei gave a long sigh of relief and did not speak. Her heart was filled with resentment. She had never hated a person as much as she did today. Fu Xiuyi had ruined her appearance and she knew that there was no hope for a comeback, so she might as well pour out all her anger and hatred on her deathbed. But after feeling carefree, she sobered up. She almost forgot what kind of person Fu Xiuyi was, but it was already too late to regret now. Moreover, Fu Xiuyi was never a person who would give people a chance to regret. Back then, Pei Lang did not make him lose anything, so he treated him like this. And because of Yi Mei, he lost the 13 capitals of Yuzhou. After hearing Yi Mei's curse, Fu Xiuyi would definitely not let her die so easily. He said, "Since you care so much about your appearance, I will fulfill your wish." He said to the jailer next to him, "Chop off her limbs and make a beauty bowl. Set up a stage in the east of the city and let thousands of people enjoy it. The spy of the great Liang, since you are so good at singing and dancing, I will bestow upon you to be a plaything for people to entertain you. Have a good life." When he finished this sentence, he turned and strode away, ignoring the heart-wrenching cries that came from behind him. The beauty bowl was a plaything used by the nobles of the previous dynasty for entertainment. He chose beauties to keep in his house. Usually, he would kneel in the corner of the house. If the owner wanted to spit or pour out the wasted tea, he would pinch the beauty's chin and let the beauty swallow it with her small mouth. It was a kind of living spittoon. This was treating people like animals, or even worse than animals. Because it was too cruel, and the life of such beauties would not be long, the emperor of the previous dynasty ordered it to be abolished. Now Fu Xiuyi wanted to take out this method that had been abolished again and used it on Yi Mei. And the beauty bowl that had its limbs chopped off was the lowest kind of the beauty bowl. It had lost its beauty and was only terrifying. The commoners were afraid of this strange thing and would definitely attack and abuse it. To Yi Mei, who valued her appearance more than her life, this was a more ruthless torture than killing her. To her, who wholeheartedly wanted to climb up, she was even lower than the commoners that she looked down on, and was not even human. Fu Xiuyi indeed understood her very well. Chapter 1105. Therefore, when dealing with her, it was like hitting the snake where it hurt, hitting the bull's eye. The once famous Mei Furen, who was respected by everyone in the imperial palace, was gone just like that. Her appearance, abandonment and disappearance were all too fast, leaving behind only her stunning beauty and the reputation of being a spy of the great Liang. But Fu Xiuyi. Yi Mei's curse continued to come true. Even though he pushed the blame to Yi Mei, the world still looked at him like he was a joke. He had a spy by his side, but even though he was an emperor, he failed to recognize her due to her beauty. In the end, the 13 capitals of Yuzhou were defeated because of her. The reputation of a fatuous ruler had gradually spread among the people. The commoners could not see the process, they only saw the results. Fu Xiuyi became a complete joke, and what was even worse was that it was as what everyone had expected. Ever since the great Liang obtained the 13 capitals of Yuzhou, the more they fought, the more courageous they became, and frequently won victories. Ming Qi retreated step by step, and it was a tragic sight, as if the previous victory was just an illusion. The strength of the great Liang was so strong that it made one terrified. When it rains, it pours. At this time, the Qin country actually started to walk on the path of self-preservation and seemed to have the intention to admit defeat and surrender to the great Liang. The great Liang's spearhead was now aimed at the Ming Qi country, and Fu Xiuyi was badly battered every day. It was terrible. The situation of a battle was ever-changing. After Great Liang obtained the 13 capitals of Yuzhou, they used the 13 capitals of Yuzhou as a stronghold and started to counterattack. They did not choose to go against the Qin country but to take action against Ming Qi first. Sure enough, when the great Liang launched an attack on Ming Qi, the Qin country started to choose to protect themselves and even sent an envoy over to try to negotiate. They were willing to cede territory and pay compensation. The Qin kingdom was already weak in terms of military strength. After such a long period of war, the Qin kingdom's treasury was empty. The taxes were collected from the people, which caused the people's hearts to be in chaos. The state of Qin realized the severity of the situation. Compared to the destruction of the country, ceding land and paying reparations was nothing. It was obviously not a good thing for the Ming Qi that the Qin country chose to throw away their responsibilities at this time. But no matter how hard Fu Xiuyi tried, the state of Qin did not care. This naturally included Xie Jingxing's contribution. To paint a picture to the Qin country, to let the Qin emperor think that the great Liang did not have any extra energy to deal with the Qin country, and only wanted to take down Ming Qi. Xie Jingxing did it flawlessly. He wanted to destroy them one by one. He had perfected this tactic of sowing discord. The great Liang's army quickly fought their way to Ming Qi's Ding capital. Meanwhile, in the Weiyang palace of Longye, Empress Xianda was letting the palace maids pour wine for the guests. This was a palace banquet, but there were no civil and military officials, no imperial concubines, only Shen Miao, Luo Tan, Emperor Yong Lu and Empress Xianda. Empress Xianda said, "Let's just treat it as a family banquet. It can also be considered a celebration for Jing Chen from 1,000 li away." Once Xie Jingxing took over the Ding capital, the Ming Qi would truly be settled. Xie Jingxing naturally would not let go of the Qin country. To cut the grass, one must remove the roots. Once and for all was the best method. Without the support of Ming Qi, the Qin country was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Xie Jingxing had dragged the battle for so long, and now that he was exerting his strength, it was all for this moment. Before long, this long and cruel war would come to an end. At that time, the 4 seas would be at peace and the world would be at peace. Only then would everyone's wish be fulfilled. Youngest Biao's sister, drink this. Luo Tan placed the plum juice in front of Shen Miao and looked at Shen Miao's lower abdomen. The imperial physician said that there will be childbirth in about another 2 months. One do not know if it is a little nephew or niece. Chapter 1106. Shen Miao's eyes drooped and her lips curled up, very quiet, most likely a young lady. That may not be the case. Empress Xianda smiled, there are also boys who are quiet and young ladies who are mischievous. But when Jing Xing returns and found out that he is a father, one do not know what kind of trouble he would cause. Shen Miao thought of the scene at that time and felt a headache. If Xie Jingxing knew that she had hidden it from him for so long, he would definitely throw a tantrum. But one would take one step at a time. Just as she was speaking, Emperor Yongle came in from outside. Shen Miao and Emperor Yongle did not meet much, and most likely Emperor Yongle did not like her as his attitude was not good every time he saw her. But recently, because of the child in her womb, he had eased up a lot. Perhaps it was because of Empress Xianda's persuasion that he would occasionally get some medicine to nourish the body and send it over. Luo Tan was somewhat afraid of Emperor Yongle and immediately sat up. The four of them ate at the same table. Luo Tan was somewhat embarrassed, Shen Miao was still alright, and Emperor Yongle had a cold expression, but only Empress Xianda was the happiest. She said, "This time Jing Xing can be considered to have done a great service. When he returns to the court, he must be properly rewarded. Ben Gong will look at it and give the Qin Wang Fei a title. Their residence of the Qin Wang does not lack anything, and it is considered good to have a title." Emperor Yongle paused and said, "N." Empress Xianda even asked, "Do you think it is good?" Shen Miao, how could she answer this? If she said, "good," it was obvious that Emperor Yongle was not happy. If she said, "not good," was this not slapping Empress Xianda's face in public? This emperor and empress were really interesting to give her such a difficult problem. Shen Miao smiled, "Let's wait for His Highness to return before talking about this." Also, Empress Xianda nodded her head, perhaps he might have other ideas. She then looked at Luo Tan, "This young lady Luo, when Gao Yang returns, Ben Gong will bestow a marriage with you?" Luo Tan almost choked on the pastry in her mouth. If it was others, she would have said it back, but the other party was the Empress, so she could only look at Shen Miao pitifully. Shen Miao held back her laughter and said, "Your ladyship, these are not urgent. It is better to wait for Gentleman Gao to return before discussing, in case Gentleman Gao has other ideas." When Luo Tan heard Shen Miao speaking up for her, she was relieved, but after listening to Shen Miao's words, she did not feel good. What kind of words were these? It was as if Gao Yang did not look up to her. She was a young lady that was as beautiful as a flower and the daughter of the Shaochun city's Luo family. Wrong, why was there a need to compare? She didn't have such intentions in the first place. Emperor Yongle looked at Empress Xianda and said in a deep voice, "Eat." Empress Xianda rebuked, "It's a family banquet. Be more casual. Why are you being so serious?" Ever since Xie Jingxing repeatedly sent news of victory, the officials in the court had all settled down and seemed to have seen clearly the young emperor's ambition and means. Even though the Xie family only had these two brothers, they were not easy to deal with. One was good at balancing the court and the commoners, while the other was good at expansion. Because of their reverence for the princess, the imperial court was much quieter. Even the memorials criticizing Emperor Yongle for not having an heir were few and far between. It was rare for Empress Xianda to have such peaceful days, and there were some subtle changes in her relationship with Emperor Yongle. It seemed that the emperor and empress who treated each other with respect had gradually become a pair of ordinary husband and wife. Emperor Yongle was an extremely principled person, and in the past, Empress Xianda would always follow the rules. In this period of time, Empress Xianda would occasionally do some willful actions, and Emperor Yongle also indulged her. Even though he was not sick of it, it was still rare. Chapter 1107. It was said that bystanders were the clearest. Shen Miao felt that Emperor Yongle had feelings for Empress Xianda. It seemed that everything was going in a good direction, and when Xie Jingxing returned, perhaps they would be able to continue to be this happy for a long time. Empress Xianda suddenly thought of something and said, "Tomorrow we are going to dig the 2 jars of snow wine that I buried last year under the plum tree. It should be very fragrant after opening the jars. Your Majesty should come with me and bury this year's. Qin Wang Fei and young Lady Luo should also come along." After digging it out, we will go to Chuihu Pavilion in the evening to admire the lotus flowers and taste the snow wine. Luo Tan was greedy and naturally agreed happily. Shen Miao also nodded her head, but it was Emperor Yonglu who was somewhat helpless. Empress Xianda was only interested in brewing tea and wine, and when she was happy, she was like a child. But in the end he still nodded his head. Seeing this, Empress Xianda was very satisfied and continued to chat with Shen Miao while eating. The second day happened to be a bright sunny day. Summer came early in Longyi. Fortunately it was the coolest in the morning, so Shen Miao and Luo Tan left early. Shen Miao's body was heavy and could not accompany Empress Xianda to dig personally. Luo Tan was carefree and was afraid that she would break the stones when moving, so Empress Xianda and Tao Gugu were the ones who dug. Emperor Yonglu said, "Get up, it is not good to injure your hand." In the past it was this Chia and Tao Gugu who dug it together. Beads of sweat appeared on Empress Xianda's forehead, but she still said with a smile, "Snow wine, one must personally dig it out for it to be fragrant. In the future, if your majesty has the heart, then you can personally bury it and dig it out, then you will know what it tastes like." As she spoke, she and Tao Gugu dug out the other jar. Monarch Yongla suddenly frowned. He paused and pressed his hand against his chest without batting an eyelid. Empress Xianda picked up one of the jars. That jar was small and cute, and it was not difficult to carry. She did not mind the dirt and was not afraid of the mud rubbing on her clothes as she raised it in front of Emperor Yonglu like she was presenting a treasure. She pulled out the cork of the wine jar and placed it under Emperor Yongli's nose and asked, "Your Majesty, come and smell, is it fragrant?" "Very fragrant." Emperor Yonglu frowned. Empress Xianda looked at him. "Does the emperor feel that it is not good? Otherwise, why would he look like this? Could it be that he buried it badly?" She was a little suspicious as she sniffed the aroma of the wine. Emperor Yonglu smiled faintly and was about to speak when he suddenly felt his vision go black. He staggered and fell to the ground. "Emperor!" Empress Xianda jumped in fright. The small jar of snow wine in her hand fell to the ground with a dong and shattered. The wine mixed with the broken pieces and released a strong fragrance, bitter and lingering. "Quick, call the imperial physician." Shen Miao quickly instructed, but an unknown premonition flashed across her heart. The veil was lowered. The head of the Gao family had finally arrived. This was Gao Yang's grandfather, Gao Zhan. The Gao family had been practicing medicine for generations and was quite famous in Longyi. Among the younger generation of the Gao family, Gao Yang's medical skills were the most outstanding. However, he didn't want to settle down in a corner and wanted to enter the imperial court. Seeing that he was stubborn, the Gao family's head simply expelled him from the Gao family. Empress Dowager Jing Xian initially felt pity for Gao Yang's talent and arranged for him to go to Mingqi. He simply became good friends with Xia Jingxing and assisted him by his side. In the beginning, Emperor Yongli's poison was personally discovered by Gao Zhan. If it was not for Gao Zhan's brilliant medical skills, Emperor Yonglu would not have lived for so many years. But the curse of being 35 years old had long passed, and those in the know thought that it was a miracle, but miracles were not that easy to create. Gao Zhan shook his head at Empress Xianda. Empress Xianda's tears fell in a moment. Chapter 1108. Luo Tan did not follow, but Shen Miao was present. Looking at Empress Xianda's tearful appearance, Shen Miao's heart was also very sour. Everyone knew what kind of friendship Empress Xianda had with Emperor Yonglu. And Emperor Yonglu was not a heartless emperor. These two people were introverted but affectionate. Once one was lost, it would be a fatal blow to the other. "Teacher." Empress Xianda held back her sobs and said, "His Majesty. How much longer can he hold on?" Gao Zhan took a look inside, sighed deeply, and said, "At most a month." "How could it be?" Shen Miao was surprised. His Majesty's illness was accumulated in the early years. In this 1 year, the poison had already invaded his internal organs and he was relying on his willpower to hold on. One think that His Majesty had suffered a lot of pain, but now he is like an arrow at the end of its flight. Gao Zhan said, "This old one has been with His Majesty's illness since young. His Majesty is a tenacious person and carries too many burdens. Even until now, he is still holding on. If your ladyship has the heart, please advise His Majesty that it is too difficult to walk on and now he should not suffer too much." All his life he had been thinking of others and sometimes he had to be selfish for once. He then bowed solemnly to Empress Xianda. "In these days, ask your ladyship to accompany His Majesty well." Gao Zhan left. Shen Miao wanted to console Empress Xianda but did not know how to start. When it came to pain, no amount of consolation from others would be of any use. The knife was not on one's body and one would not feel pain. People always thought that with a few light comforting words, everything would be resolved, but it was not like this. Empress Xianda forced a smile and said, "You go back first." Ben Gong is very well. Shen Miao did not say anything and only told her to take good care of her body before retreating. Returning to the room, she could not help but caress her lower abdomen and opened a sachet on the table. The red bean looked clean and complete. There were so many life and death separations in this world. People who were still laughing a moment ago would fall the next moment. Heaven was too cruel and was not willing to give people good times and good luck. One could only rely on oneself. She would protect her lover and her loved ones. Empress Xianda sat in front of the bed. Emperor Yonglu was already awake. She lowered her head, deep in thought. Her side profile was beautiful and gentle. It was as if time had turned back and everything was as it was in the beginning. "Qingzhen," Emperor Yonglu said. Empress Xianda came back to her senses. She looked at him and said, "Your Majesty is awake. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "No." Emperor Yonglu shook his head. The two of them were silent for a while before Emperor Yonglu spoke. "Qingzhen, we don't have much time left." Empress Xianda looked at him and didn't speak. He paused and then continued, "This winter, it seems I won't be able to accompany you to bury the snow brew. Although one jar has been broken, there is still another jar. If your Majesty does not mind, let's find a cool day and go to Emerald Lake Pavilion. This concubine is willing to drink with your Majesty." However, the prince consort and the others did not have a share. Chuihu Pavilion's summer scenery is very good, and this year's lotuses are blooming very well. Empress Xianda acted as if she did not hear Emperor Yongli's words and continued to speak. "Qingzhen," Emperor Yonglu cut her off, "we cannot accompany you anymore." His face was pale and he was still as handsome as before. However, he did not have the dominance and coldness of an emperor. He was like a noble young master, but he was very thin, haggard, and very sad. Empress Xianda turned her head away. Emperor Yonglu could not see her expression. He only heard her voice that seemed to be separated by a layer of mist. It was hazy, but it made people's hearts ache. She said, "Your Majesty is always very heartless. You are not willing to lie to this concubine, not even a single word. That's right, it is time to wake up from this beautiful dream." Chapter 1109. Emperor Yonglu hesitated before saying, "Sorry. Your Majesty does not need to apologize to this Chia, and there is nothing to apologize to this Chia. This Chia is living my own life, and has nothing to do with your Majesty." Empress Xianda said, "Just now, Teacher Gao came over and told this Chia that your Majesty has been struggling for the past year. This Chia wants to ask, why is your Majesty like this? What's the point of enduring the pain so painstakingly? For Great Liang." Emperor Yonglu said, "Zhen wants to see Xia Yuan conquer the country, and protect Great Liang. Zhen wants to see the peace of the world. Zhen hopes to help Empress Mother complete her wish in this lifetime, but Zhen does not have much time, and might not be able to wait for that day. Empress Xianda was silent for a long time before replying, so, this Chia understands. Qing Zhen. Emperor Yongle said, you, make plans for yourself. What does your majesty want this Chia to do? Empress Xianda suddenly turned around, her eyes glistening with tears. She said, you want this Chia to hide my identity and live the life of a normal person? Or live the rest of my life in this palace in luxury? Or find a good husband to remarry? With each sentence she said, the pain in Emperor Yongli's eyes grew. He grabbed the blanket under his hand without batting an eyelid, and said faintly, as long as you are happy. Empress Xianda suddenly turned her head away. Emperor Yongle could see a large tear falling on the back of her hand. When she spoke again, her voice was calm. She said, this Chia understands. Many thanks to your majesty for considering so much for this Chia. This Chia will do this. Your majesty should think about how to write the succession decree. Some things need to be planned early. She stood up and said, this Chia has other matters and will leave first. Your majesty, rest well, and remember to drink a pot of wine with this Chia at Chuihu Pavilion. She left. Empress Xianda rarely got angry, especially in these days. Emperor Yongle had a good relationship with her, and had a warm smile every day. But even the softest water would have a temper. When it was angry, it would be like a block of ice, so stubborn that it made people angry. But he could not bear to be angry. After Empress Xianda left, Emperor Yongle coughed violently. He felt the handkerchief under his pillow and wiped his mouth. Eunuch Deng, who was standing at the side, hurriedly served hot water and said, Your Majesty, be careful. Eunuch Deng, Emperor Yongle frowned, did I do something wrong? His face showed a rare youthful confusion, causing Eunuch Deng to feel a lump in his throat. Eunuch Deng had served Emperor Yongle for many years and had watched him grow up. Emperor Yongle's current appearance reminded him of the time when Emperor Yongle was poisoned by Emperor Xiaowu's favorite concubine. Empress Xiao hugged Emperor Yongle and cried bitterly when she learned from the master of the Gao family that he would not live past the age of 35. At that time, the still young Emperor Yongle comforted Empress Xiao helplessly. He asked Eunuch Deng in confusion, Eunuch Deng, is my poison very serious? The young man grew from a gentle and elegant prince to an unfathomable emperor. But there would still be a day when he would ask the people around him in confusion, did I do wrong? Before Eunuch Deng could speak, Emperor Yongle sighed and said, I am so envious of Xia Yuan. Even though it is very difficult for Xia Yuan and Zhen, that kid's luck is better than Zhen's. If Zhen can live on. He did not continue. There were many things in the world that ended because of an if. Because there was no if. In 10 days' time, Xie Jingxing took over the Ding capital. The emperor of Mingqi, Fu Xiuyi, was shot to death by the chaotic army. Chapter 11:10. Speaking of it, it was really funny that Fu Xiuyi became the ruler of a subjugated country. He originally said in high spirits that he would live and die together with Ming Qi and would definitely fight with the soldiers until the last moment. As long as the Ding capital was not destroyed, he would still be the emperor of Ming Qi and would not surrender to anyone. But at the last moment, one did not know why he changed his mind and wanted to secretly leave. Perhaps he had the idea of making a comeback one day. However, Fu Xiuyi had calculated everything but did not calculate the human heart. Those advisors of his were able to see the situation of Ming Qi earlier than him. When the advisors knew that Fu Xiuyi made a fake decision to perish together with the enemy but he himself wanted to escape, they suddenly flew into a rage. Speaking of which, Fu Xiuyi was also caught in a cocoon of his own making. His group of advisors were initially roped in by him using gold and silver or using beauties. As the saying goes, a hero does not ask about one's background. Fu Xiuyi thought that he was a person who cherished talents and did not look at the other party's identity, thus there were all sorts of people in his advisors. There were robbers, bandits and even evil people who killed without blinking an eye. These people did not have any good or evil distinction and followed Fu Xiuyi because he was able to provide them with the treasures and women that they wanted so that they could start a great undertaking. Now that the great undertaking had been destroyed, how could Fu Xiuyi still want to run away? Those advisors who were the most courageous and had the most ferocious would think of ways to tie Fu Xiuyi up on the city walls and personally took a bow and arrow to shoot Fu Xiuyi to death. Finally they chopped off Fu Xiuyi's head to claim credit from Xia Jingxing and hoped that he would surrender. Fu Xiuyi had traversed unhindered for a lifetime and did not think that he would end up like this. Since he was not like a monarch who would perish together with the country, at least he could maintain his integrity. He was also not able to preserve his life and planned to stage a comeback in the second half of his life. Instead he was like a prisoner that was shot to death in front of the Ding capital's commoners by the people that he had spent a lot of money to win over, and even became a token to claim credit from the enemy. The last thing he saw in a daze was a young man sitting on a tall horse at the foot of the city gate tower in front of thousands of soldiers. He held the reins in his hand and looked over lazily. He was as cynical as ever, and his eyes were clearly filled with contempt. But before he could think about it, he couldn't see anything. His great cause, his plans and ambitions, all came to a screeching halt at this moment. He still could not understand. He had clearly become the emperor. He had clearly planned for this entire life. In the end, how could he be defeated by an enemy that he had wanted to eradicate from the very beginning? Perhaps God was unfair, or perhaps he was unlucky. That's why he lost. Downstairs, Xia Jingxing made a tisk sound and said, Fu Xiuyi really has the ability to scatter people's hearts to this extent. People's hearts won't last long if they are tempted by money. Gao Yang smiled. Let's go. Let's go to the city. Oh yes. Ji Yushu said, Princess Rong Xian and the Su family's people have been rescued. Now, Xia Jingxing's expression did not change, protect them. As for the rest, let them be. When Shen Miao received the news, she was in a daze for a long time. She did not expect that the enemy of the past lifetime would be solved so cleanly and neatly. But she also felt that everything seemed to be as it should be. Fu Xiuyi had reaped what he sowed early and there would be a day when there would be a harvest. Mei Furan had plotted with a tiger for its skin and would eventually be bitten by the tiger. They were always making use of each other all the time, using money and beauties to exchange for what they wanted. This kind of people's hearts seemed to be omnipotent on the surface but ultimately would not last long. That was why Fu Xiuyi would be betrayed by his own aides and that was why Mei Furan would die in the hands of the man who pampered her to the heavens in the past lifetime. Chapter 11:11. Shen Miao thought that after knowing the ending of these two people, she would definitely be happy but at this moment, there was not much feeling in her heart. It was as if she had only done what she should do and did not take revenge as her responsibility for the rest of her life. Because she looked at her lower abdomen. She still had more important things, and the present. Trapped in the shackles of hatred, the one who could not walk out was herself. But Xia Jingxing and this child finally let her walk out from that long nightmare. The longer one lived alone, the calmer one's heart would be. She had finally done the last thing that she could do for Fu Ming and Wan Yu. She wanted to live well in her current life. Luo Tan was looking at the flowers outside and said, the lotus flowers are really good. Biao youngest sister, let us go for a walk later. Shen Miao nodded her head. The lotus flowers were very good and Empress Xianda loved to look at lotus flowers. Emperor Yong Li's health was also getting worse by the day. The Edict of Succession had already been privately discussed with Emperor Yong Li's trusted ministers. Emperor Yongle did not hide his illness from them, and the few ministers had already secretly arranged everything. If there was really a day when Emperor Yongle did not wake up, everything would take its course and the edict of succession would be announced to the world. When Xie Jingxing returned to the court, what would be waiting for him would be the responsibility of the entire Great Liang. Naturally, Emperor Yongli's illness was also hidden from Xie Jingxing. These things were like heavy shackles, and those who knew would not be happy. This was also Emperor Yongli's own choice. And at this time, Empress Xianda was the calmest. She still brewed tea, read books, played chess, and wrote every day. She chatted with Emperor Yongle about daily life and occasionally teased Xin Miao. If one ignored Emperor Yongli's increasingly pale face, perhaps everything looked no different from before. In the Weiyang Palace, Empress Xianda looked outside and said, "It just rained today, and when night falls, it will definitely be very cool. This concubine cannot bear to drink that small jar of snow wine. Let's do it tonight. How about your Majesty accompany this concubine to drink it?" Emperor Yongle sat on the chair and glanced at Empress Xianda before laughing. "One jar. Do you want to get drunk?" But his words were very gentle. If one could get drunk and not wake up, who wouldn't want to? Empress Xianda muttered to herself. She then said, "One jar of wine isn't enough to make one drunk. This concubine's alcohol tolerance is very good. When I was young, I often stole wine with my older brother in the mansion to drink." When Emperor Yongle heard this, he showed a rare look of interest and said, "This doesn't seem like something you would do." "This is nothing." When Empress Xianda said this, there was some pride in her voice. "Drinking with my brothers, I have never lost." At that time, his father even boasted that he would definitely find an aged wine that could make his concubine drunk with just one sip. He searched for a long time, but to no avail. Later, when I entered the palace, I didn't dare to drink too much, so I didn't drink anymore. One moment it's tea, the next moment it's wine. Emperor Yongle sighed, "Your preferences are very far apart. Drinking tea clears one's mind. Drinking alcohol is indulgence." Empress Xianda smiled, "So tonight, Your Majesty, don't put on airs and indulge for once." The snow wine was personally brewed by this concubine. Although it can't compare to bejeweled nectar, it can still be compared to moon breeze. "All right." Emperor Yongle said, "I will accompany you for this one time." In the late summer, the night breeze blew gently. The lake was 10 li green, the wind lotuses were slender and elegant. As the breeze blew, green ripples appeared. Long Ye's summer was long, and even at the end of the 8th month, there was no chill. In the small pavilion in the middle of the lake, there was a small jar of wine, a few pastries and 2 wine bowls on the table. Emperor Yongle looked at the round wine bowl in front of him and raised his eyebrows. "Use this?" When he made this action that Xie Jingxing loved to do, it was very similar to Xie Jingxing. Chapter 11-12. If you drink it in small sips, you won't be able to taste the snow brew. Empress Xianda smiled and said, "Only when you drink it in big mouthfuls like this will it be sweet and refreshing." "You usually drink like this?" Emperor Yongle frowned. "Nonsense. This Chia drinks alone and no one sees." "Why do you care so much?" Empress Xianda was unconcerned. She raised a small wine jar and poured wine for Emperor Yongle. Emperor Yongle wanted to say something but stopped. He looked deeply at Empress Xianda and was silent. Empress Xianda brewed snow brew every year, but this was the first time Emperor Yongle drank with her. For so many years, she brewed tea alone and brewed wine alone. Flowers bloomed and wilted, and she lived freely in the palace. She did a good job as empress, but people almost forgot that she was just a woman and would be lonely. Most of the time, she could only taste loneliness alone, as though the wine was slightly bitter. Tao Gugu and Deng Gonggong stood far away, as though they wanted to leave this rare moment for Emperor and Empress. Empress Xianda passed the wine bowl to Emperor Yonglu and smiled. Every time Jing Xing comes to the palace banquets, he likes to drink with this bowl. This Chia sees that your majesty seems to be very envious. This Chia does not need to care so much tonight. With only this Chia here, this Chia will not laugh at your majesty's lack of etiquette. What a joke. What is there to be envious of? After Emperor Yongla finished speaking, he picked up the wine bowl and looked at it in a picky manner. However, he still took a sip from the edge of the bowl. Empress Xianda saw this and couldn't help but laugh. She said, "What is your majesty doing? You should learn from this Chia." She picked up the wine bowl and drank with her head raised. Even though it was just a simple action, it was still very elegant and pleasing to the eye when she did it. Emperor Yonglu coughed lightly, "Nonsense." But his gaze followed Empress Xianda and was very gentle. Empress Xianda poured another bowl for herself and said with a smile, "When I was little, I followed my father to read history books. I was very envious of those great heroes who were down and out in the world. They were handsome and heroic, eating meat and drinking wine in big mouthfuls. They were at the edge of the world. I felt that this kind of life was not a waste to live in this world. I thought that in the future, I would definitely marry such a great hero. I would make tea for him in the day and drink with him in the night." As she said this, her eyes shone brightly. It was as if she had returned to the time when she was a young girl, asking for wine from her elder brother. "What happened next?" Emperor Yonglu asked. Later on, this concubine married the emperor. The emperor refused to eat meat and drink wine in large mouthfuls. He really couldn't be considered to be unrestrained, nor was he coarse. On the contrary, he was very cold. This concubine regretted it. Emperor Yonglu narrowed his eyes as he looked at her. Her cheeks gradually turned red. He didn't know if she was drunk or not. Emperor Yonglu thought that she was definitely drunk. When Empress Xianda was sober, she would not say such childish words to criticize him. He said, "Didn't you say you could hold your liquor well? Why are you acting like a drunkard in front of me?" "I'm not drunk." Empress Xianda said, "I do want to get drunk, but after so many years, I have no choice but to stay sober." Emperor Yongla couldn't smile anymore. It was really this concubine's bad luck to be married to the emperor. Everything was fine, but I had to share my husband with countless women. Even those big families have concubines, the main wife at least has a child. This concubine doesn't even have a child of her own. This marriage isn't good. Empress Xianda smiled and said, "That's why this concubine is very envious of the Qin Wang Fei." The Qin Wang Fei doesn't have an easy life and has many things to worry about. But she is luckier than this concubine. She still has a choice. Jing Xing treats her very well. Jing Xing isn't as cruel as the emperor. Chapter 11-13. Emperor Yonglu was silent for a long time, so long that he could hear the frogs croaking in the pond and the cicadas chirping on the willow trees. He said, "You also have a choice." Qing Zhen. Qinxie did not have a choice from the start. Empress Xianda interrupted him, "Qinxie's heart is all on your majesty, how can I have the time to make other choices?" Emperor Yonglu was stunned. Empress Xianda had already raised her wine bowl and drank the second bowl of wine. "When your majesty sees Qinxie, is there any difference?" Empress Xianda looked at him, "Do you also feel that Qinxie's choice in this life is something that I have to do?" "Yes." Emperor Yonglu paused before saying, "You are very good. You are the best empress of Great Liang. No one can do better than you. Back then, Imperial Mother liked you a lot, and I also liked you a lot. You are intelligent, generous, and the entire inner palace was organized well by you. It was not wrong for me to choose you. Empress Xianda laughed, and as she laughed, she almost burst into tears. She said, as expected, the choice that your majesty had to make is actually Empress Xianda, and not Qingzhen. Qinxia understands. She looked at the moon in the sky, and there seemed to be sparkles at the corner of her eyes. When she turned her head, she was back to her usual gentle and calm self. She said, Qinxia has considered the things that your majesty told Qinxia before. I feel that your majesty is right. After all, it is my own life, and I have to live it. Emperor Yonglu stared at her and felt his throat was dry. After a moment, he managed to ask, did I find it? Not yet. Empress Xianda smiled slightly, but there is no rush for these things. When that day comes, let nature take its course. Emperor Yonglu was speechless. Empress Xianda raised her bowl and said, this bowl of snow wine, Qinxia will toast your majesty. After being husband and wife for so many years, it is fate from the previous life, no matter if it is good fate or bad fate. But in these years, while Qinxia's life is not very good, it is not bad. Many thanks, your majesty. Emperor Yonglu also raised his wine bowl. However, if one looked closely, one could see that his fingers were trembling slightly, as if he was unable to hold it firmly. However, he hid it very well. He immediately covered it up with his sleeve and drank all the wine in the bowl. After drinking a big bowl in one go, it was no longer sweet and mellow. From his throat to his internal organs, he felt a burning pain in his heart, making him feel that the bitterness was comparable to life. He saw Empress Xianda stand up and say to him with a smile, actually, this jar of wine looks like a lot, but it was emptied after drinking a few bowls with Emperor. It was a waste of such a beautiful night, but it didn't matter, the future was long. This concubine had a good time drinking with His Majesty today, so this concubine will first go out for a stroll. Your Majesty should also rest. It's late at night and the dew is heavy. Be careful not to catch a cold. She left in a brisk manner. Thinking back to what she had said just now, it was clear that she was bidding farewell to something. Now that the words of farewell were finished, the wine of farewell was finished. What was left was just like now, to leave his world step by step and never return. Emperor Yonglu turned to look at Empress Xianda's departing back. Her figure disappeared into the long corridor. She didn't even turn her head back, her steps were especially firm. His heart suddenly ached, and an indescribable pain slowly spread from the bottom of his heart to his limbs. His heart was beating very fast, almost as if it was convulsing. He could not breathe, and he could not speak a complete sentence. He suddenly fell down from his throne. Eunuch Deng was waiting at the side and jumped in fright when he saw the scene. He hurried over. He helped Emperor Yonglu up, but saw the other's face was terrifyingly pale, his lips trembling. His heart shook, and he immediately called for the Tai and the guards to send Emperor Yonglu back to Yang Xian Hall. Chapter 11-14. Empress Xianda walked in the night. As the wind blew, the wine she drank seemed to be forced to spill out. The temporary dizziness disappeared in an instant, and she became awake again. She held onto the railing by the pond and sighed tiredly. She knew that the words she said today were in a fit of pique. But she was extremely afraid of how long Emperor Yongla had left to live. She wanted to avoid that result. She didn't want to see, she didn't want to hear, she stubbornly blocked her ears. But Emperor Yongla always brought it up and made her face things she didn't want to face. Even dirt had some of its nature, let alone a person. Aunt Tao said, Nyang Nyang, it's cold outside, let's go back first. Empress Xianda shook her head. She wore a string of prayer beads on her wrist. She had gotten them for Emperor Yongla in the temple. Every night, she would recite the prayer beads and copy scriptures, praying that the heavens would pity the people and let a miracle happen. Each of the prayer beads had been polished until they were smooth. It was clear that Empress Xianda had worn them for many years. She looked at the moon in the sky. The moon was very round. Not long after this battle, it would be a year. The moon was full and waning in a year. Everything had a good ending. She was about to receive her merit, but she just couldn't control herself and did some things that were out of control. She felt a bit disgusted with herself. She turned her head and wanted to walk forward. Suddenly, he heard a crackling sound. He looked down and saw that the string of Buddhist beads in his hand had broken. The Buddhist beads scattered from the broken string and fell to the ground, making a crisp sound as they hit the ground. Why did the prayer beads break for no reason? Aunt Tao. Empress Xianda murmured. A wave of uneasiness suddenly rose in her heart. It was as if someone had grabbed her heart and she couldn't breathe for a moment. Nyang nyang. Aunt Tao jumped in fright and quickly came to support her. Empress Xianda waved her hand and squatted down in a panic. She said, "Quick, help me pick it up." As soon as Aunt Tao squatted down, she saw the little eunuch who had been following Eunuch Deng running over in a hurry. He said with a panicked expression, "Your Highness, His Majesty is not well. Please go and take a look." Empress Xianda had just picked up a prayer bead that had fallen. Hearing this, her hand couldn't help but let go. The prayer beads spun on the ground and fell into the pond. It didn't even make a splash on the surface of the water. With a pop, it sank into the water and disappeared. In Yangxin Palace Hall, the eunuchs and palace maids outside were all kneeling on the ground. Eunuch Deng stood in the corner of the room with his head bowed. He looked very sad. When Empress Xianda entered, Gao Zhan had just come out. Seeing her, he shook his head. Empress Xianda staggered. Fortunately, she was holding on to Tao Gugu's hand, so she didn't fall. After a while, she said, "All of you can leave." Emperor Yongle waved his hand as well. Everyone in the room retreated. Empress Xianda stepped forward. She walked very slowly, as if she was resisting an ending that she didn't want to believe. But she had to go forward. When she walked in, she half knelt in front of the bed and looked at the person on the bed. Emperor Yongle also looked at her. After a while, he smiled and said, "That's good. Before I leave, I finally drank the snow wine you brewed." Xingji. Empress Xianda looked at him with tears in her eyes. She said, "Xingji, Emperor Yongle's character, not, Your Majesty." That was when she was still a young girl. Empress Xiao liked her and said Xia Qi's character to her. Empress Xianda liked Xia Qi's character and felt that this person was very upright. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.